Chapter 1. Aftermath. Renlin staggered forward with a choking gasp as the blade punched through him, hot steel tearing his breath from his lungs. The world tilted. Sound became a low roar in his ears, as if he stood in a storm. His hands, pale and trembling, reached instinctively toward the rapier's blade that jutted from his chest, but his fingers found only air slick with blood. He could taste iron on his tongue. His eyes darted to Izzi and Kaelin, wide, confused, pleading, before his knees buckled. Behind him, Celine's breath was steady, her silver eyes burning with cruel satisfaction. With a swift, practiced pull, she wrenched her blade free. The sound was sickening, a wet scrape of steel against bone. Renlin's body arched, then she shoved him carelessly forward. He toppled into the black water below, crimson spiraling out in ribbons as the sea swallowed him whole. "Izzi!" Kaelin's roar was half command, half anguish, but Izzi was already moving. The shock was gone in an instant, replaced by the cold fire that lived in the marrow of her bones. Her rage did not come wild and reckless, it sharpened her. Her chestnut hair caught in the torchlight as she lunged, daggers flashing like silver fangs. With a flick of her wrist, she signaled Kaelin, "Get him out." Celine raised her rapier and with a languid flick of her wrist, swiped Renlin's blood from the blade. The droplets spattered across Izzi's cheek, warm against her skin. Celine smirked as if to torment her further. That smirk was all it took. Izzi sprang forward, the point of her dagger aimed for Celine's throat. Their blades collided with a clash that rang out across the stone chamber. Sparks scattered. Celine met Izzi's ferocity stroke for stroke, her rapier thrusts elegant and precise. Each movement carried a predator's grace, not frantic but deliberate, each step meant to herd Izzi closer to the torchlit walls. Flames licked higher as Celine's free hand twisted subtly, drawing fire from the nearest torch. The flame bent unnaturally, coiling toward Izzi like a serpent. Izzi ducked under it, the heat searing across her hair as she rolled and slashed at Celine's side. Steel met steel again, Celine parrying with a sharp laugh. "There you are, little rabbit." Celine spoke, voice like smoke. Izzi's only answer was a vicious flurry, twin daggers dancing, crossing in deceptive arcs. Each strike was fast, cold, calculated. Every ounce of pain from her past distilled into motion. Her violet-gray eyes locked with Celine's silver ones, neither blinking, neither yielding. Meanwhile, Kaelin thundered to the water's edge. His heavy frame hit the stone with a splash as he reached down, hauling Renlin's limp body up from the tide. Blood streamed between his fingers as he clamped a hand over the wound, growling curses through clenched teeth. "Stay with me, scribe, stay with me." Renlin's breaths rattled, shallow, each one weaker than the last. But Kaelin had no time to despair. Above them, Izzi and Celine's battle had become a storm, steel ringing, fire twisting, shadows dancing like specters on the temple walls. Kaelin knelt in the pooling salt water, Renlin's blood seeping hot through his fingers. The scribe's breaths were shallow, uneven, each one catching like a torn sail. Kaelin's broad hands worked with brute delicacy, ripping fabric from his own leathers to bind the gaping wound. "Hold, boy, don't you dare leave us." His tusked jaw clenched as he pressed harder, the copper tang of blood thick in his nose. Above the roar of water, steel sang against steel. Izzi's daggers struck in a relentless rhythm, each clash with Celine's rapier reverberating through the chamber. She risked a glance past her opponent, violet-gray eyes catching Kaelin's hunched form over Renlin. A flicker of fear flared in her chest, but she smothered it, pressing forward with the cold assurance of command. "Keep him breathing," she snapped between strikes. Kaelin grunted without looking up, his thick fingers knotting the makeshift bandage. Izzi lunged and Celine met her, steel shrieking as blade caught blade. They were matched, every thrust, every feint answered in kind. Izzi's movements were sharp, fast, honed by rage and precision. Celine's were fluid, practiced, the elegance of a predator at play. Neither yielded ground, their weapons sparking like lightning in the torchlit dark. Celine's smirk widened, her silver eyes glimmered, and with a flourish she hurled her free hand toward the nearest torch. Fire leapt into her palm, condensed into a searing orb. With a flick of her wrist, the fireball blazed across the narrow gap. Izzi had no time for caution. She raised her forearm to shield her face and dove straight through the torrent. Heat engulfed her, the flames licking her braid, smoke stinging her lungs. One of her daggers spun from her grasp as the old wound on her hand tore open anew, hot blood mingling with the fire's bite. She hissed, but did not falter. Through the blaze, her other dagger struck true, the steel bit deep into Celine's hip. Celine gasped, her body twisting with the impact. For the first time, her composure faltered, but only for a heartbeat. Her hand clamped the wound, blood seeping between her fingers, and then her lips curved into that same infuriating smile. "Well done," she breathed, voice laced with venomous amusement. "You've finally managed to touch me. Shame it won't matter." Her words were a blade of their own, stabbing where Izzi's heart remembered too much. Izzi's chest rose and fell, her hand blistered and bleeding, her dagger slick with Celine's blood. Behind her, Kaelin tightened the final knot of his crude bandage on Renlin's chest. The scribe's breathing steadied by a fraction, fragile, uncertain. Kaelin lifted his gaze, the firelight catching the fury in his green-gray eyes. He rose, water cascading from his leathers, his greatsword glinting as he moved to Izzi's side. Together they stood, battered, scorched, bloodied, facing Celine as she straightened, still smiling, silver eyes burning brighter against the shadows. For the first time, the air seemed to still, torchlight trembled, water lapped at the stones, and 3 lives hung in the balance of what came next. Kaelin's massive frame shifted beside Izzi, his blades catching the glow of the torchlight. His voice rumbled low, steady as stone. "This ends now." For the first time that night, Celine turned her gaze fully upon him. Silver eyes narrowed, her lips curling into a sly smile as she dipped her head. "As you say." Her hand snapped outward, flame blossomed, erupting into a wall of fire that roared between them. Heat thundered against the chamber walls, drowning them in orange and smoke. For 5 long seconds the inferno raged, and when it died, Celine was gone. Only the stench of charred air and the echo of her laughter remained. Then came the pounding of boots. From the temple's inner halls, guards spilled onto the wooden dock in formation, 10 strong, their blades and spears catching the trembling torchlight. Their shouts filled the chamber, rattling like thunder. For a breath, silence hung between Izzi and Kaelin until Izzi's voice cut through it, low and venomous. "Stay back, Kaelin. They're mine." As she knelt down, picking up the dagger that she had dropped. Kaelin blinked, caught off guard. The tone was not Izzi's usual quick wit or fierce confidence. This voice was colder, darker, a shard of something buried deep, finally freed. The first guard lunged. Izzi met him head-on. Her daggers blurred, cutting an arc that split his throat before he could even cry out. Blood fanned across the dock planks, hot and thick. She whirled into the next, her blades striking with precision and merciless rhythm. Each step was calculated, each movement executed with inhuman speed. The guards tried to rally, 3 surrounding her with spears. Izzi darted low, slipping under their thrusts, her daggers plunging upward into ribs and soft bellies. The crack of bone, the hiss of steel through flesh. The dock became a slaughterhouse. Kaelin stood frozen, watching as his companion tore through the temple guard like a storm given flesh. There was no hesitation in her strikes, no mercy. Even when blades nicked her leathers, she ignored the wounds, driving forward with an unrelenting hunger. By the time the last guard fell, gurgling on his own blood, Izzi stood in silence, chest heaving, her violet-gray eyes glacial and empty. Her hands dripped red, her daggers slick, her braid plastered with gore. Kaelin finally breathed, voice rough. "Iz?" She turned toward him, eyes still distant, predatory. He stepped forward, slow but certain, and wrapped his thick arms around her. The daggers clattered to the dock. For a long moment she did not move, then the hardness in her gaze cracked and her eyes softened. Her body shuddered against his chest as if she were surfacing from drowning. More shouts echoed from the temple halls. Another wave of guards approached, dozens this time. Kaelin's jaw tightened. "We have to go. The guards will tend the boy. They know his duties here. They'll see us as the perpetrators if we stay." Izzi's lips parted, protest rising, but Kaelin's eyes met hers with quiet resolve. She swallowed hard, her hands trembling. At last, she gave a reluctant nod. Together they dove from the dock, the black water closing over their heads. They swam hard beneath the surface, the world above muffled into a distant chaos of boots and shouts. When they surfaced in a shadowed alcove far from the temple's light, Izzi dragged herself onto the stone, chest heaving. Her eyes burned, not from the salt water but from fury and grief. Celine had slipped through her fingers again. Renlin's life hung by a thread. She clenched her fists, blood still streaking her skin, and whispered hoarsely into the night. "She got away, and Renlin—" Kaelin said nothing. He only set his hand on her shoulder, grounding her, as the dark water lapped quietly at the stone beneath them. The in-between. The castle loomed like a wound against the night sky, its jagged towers stabbing upward through mist and moonlight. Celine's steps echoed across the cavernous main hall, stone floors painted with the wavering glow of braziers. Her silver eyes gleamed, and her hand hovered possessively over the cloth-wrapped bundle tucked against her side, the prize she had bled for. From the shadows, a voice slipped like a knife through silk. Was this really necessary? Celine halted. Against a pillar stood a cloaked figure, tall and lean, the hood shrouding most of his face. Only the sharp line of his jaw caught the firelight. A faint silver clasp glinted at his shoulder, but otherwise his garments were dark, blending him into the hall's shadows. His arms were crossed loosely, the angle of his stance careless yet deliberate. "Why are we wasting time stringing this elf along?" the man continued, his tone smooth, steady, a voice that carried weight without needing to rise. "You already had the pieces you needed, and you knew exactly what to do with them." Celine resumed walking, her bootsteps unhurried as she closed the distance between them. "Because," she said, her voice lilting, "sometimes the past demands its due. I wanted to reminisce, and I wanted some entertainment." The man's head tilted slightly, his hood shifting just enough to reveal the faintest suggestion of pointed ears. Elf blood. His voice held the edge of a blade drawn in quiet disapproval. "Really? And for that little indulgence, you let yourself get cut." Celine's lips curved, though the wound at her hip ached beneath her robes. She trailed her fingers lazily across the pillar as she drew near, eyes never leaving his shadowed face. "You know what I think?" he went on, the faintest scorn threading his words. "I think you still have feelings for this elf. And you—" Celine cut him off with a sharp laugh that rang like broken glass. "Don't be absurd." From the folds of her cloak, she drew forth the object wrapped in cloth and unfurled it with a flourish. The braziers flared as though in reverence. In her hands gleamed a fragment of the artifact of VIII, a shard of ancient design, etched with runes that seemed to ripple faintly as though alive. Its glow cast her features in a halo of cruel triumph. "See?" she murmured. "Nothing wasted, nothing lost." The man's gaze shifted to the fragment. Whatever irritation lingered in his voice, it fell away beneath the pull of the artifact's strange radiance. He stepped from the pillar and walked with her, slow, deliberate strides echoing hers. Celine, ever the predator, slipped behind him as they passed into the deeper hall. She wrapped her arms around his torso from behind, her cheek brushing his shoulder, her whisper hot against his ear. "You worry too much. Enjoy this with me. We're on the cusp of something eternal." His shoulders stiffened at her touch, irritation plain even in his silence. With a sharp shrug, he shook her off, stepping out of her grasp. His attention remained fixed on the shard of VIII cradled in her hand, the light of it painting his hooded face in flickering lines. The man turned the piece in his hands once in the torchlight. Runes shimmered faintly across its surface like ripples upon water, spilling pale radiance into the gloom. He studied it with a quiet intensity, long enough for Celine to wonder if even he could hear the whispers that clung to the fragment. Then, without ceremony, he tossed it back to her. Celine caught it effortlessly, though the careless gesture stoked an ember of annoyance in her chest. "Where's the next lead?" he asked. His tone was calm, but beneath it throbbed a pulse of impatience, like a drumbeat held too long. "I need something to do. I grow tired of waiting in this ruin while you reminisce." Celine cradled the shard against her palm, lips curving. "So restless, always eager to leap ahead." Her silver eyes gleamed as she stepped closer, her voice turning low, suggestive. "Perhaps we should celebrate first. You could always do me, if that's what it takes to ease your impatience." His demeanor did not shift, not a flicker of amusement, not even disdain. The hood shadowed his features, but his silence was a wall, as unyielding as his presence. Celine tilted her head, studying him like a puzzle. Every other soul she'd touched she could unravel with ease, memories laid bare beneath her lips and hands. But this one, this cloaked man, his magic was an armor she could not penetrate. Every attempt to slip past it had met only emptiness. It unsettled her, it intrigued her. Her smile returned, sharper now. "You're no fun," she breathed, stepping ahead of him, the long train of her cloak brushing over the stone as she led the way. He followed in silence, his boots striking steady, measured echoes through the hall. As they reached the arching doors of her private chambers, Celine slowed, her fingers tracing the cold iron handle. She wanted to taste him, to test again the barrier that kept him sealed away from her touch. Was it truly impenetrable? Or had she simply not pressed deep enough? She glanced back over her shoulder, eyes glittering in the dim light. "Come," she murmured, pushing the door open into her chamber's gloom. "We can speak of leads and maps later. For now—" Her lips curved into something between invitation and challenge. "Let's see if you're as untouchable as you pretend to be." The cloaked figure stepped inside, the firelight bending around him. still silent, still unreadable. Celine's pulse quickened, not with desire, but with the thrill of facing a locked door she was determined to break. The heavy doors closed behind them with a resonant thud. Celine's chambers stretched wide, draped in crimson silks and shadows, a bed of blackwood looming at the far wall. Golden braziers spilled a languid glow, making the tapestries shimmer like liquid fire. She let her cloak slip from her shoulders, the fabric whispering to the floor. The wound at her hip tugged sharply, but she welcomed the pain, a reminder of Izzi's mark, of unfinished business. She turned her attention instead to the cloaked figure now standing inside her room, still as stone, his hooded gaze locked on the shard of Thalen glowing faintly in her hand. Celine approached with the slow grace of a predator, silver eyes fixed on him. "You hide yourself too well," she murmured, voice a silken coil. "Even now, I can't see what lies beneath." "Come," she whispered. She brushed against him deliberately, the tips of her fingers gliding across his chest as if tasting the weave of his cloak. He didn't flinch, didn't lean in, only shifted slightly, as though tolerating her touch rather than succumbing to it. That only made her smile deepen. "You see," she whispered, circling him now. "That makes you the most interesting man in this castle. Everyone else I can unravel with a kiss. One brush of my lips and their lives open to me like a book. But you—" She appeared behind him, pressing her palms against his shoulders, her breath warm against the edge of his hood. "You're a closed tome." Her lips ghosted against the line of his jaw, her magic surged with the contact, threads of fire and memory seeking an opening. Nothing, just an endless void. He turned, not violently but firmly, his hand catching her wrist. For the first time, he spoke with something sharper in his tone. Not anger, not desire, but a line drawn. "Enough." Celine laughed low, twisting her arm free with a serpentine motion. She pressed against him then, more forceful, her mouth finding his, not for passion but to strike, to probe. Her magic flared violently, hammering against his unseen walls. Flames curled from the braziers, spilling across the chamber as if pulled into her hunger. She dug deeper, more insistent, clawing at the silence inside him. And still, nothing. No flicker, no echo, no memory to steal. His void was absolute. When she pulled back, her lips curled into a feral grin. Her eyes blazed not with frustration but with fascination, a hunger sharper than before. "Do you know what you've done?" she breathed, voice trembling with delight. "You've made me want you. Not for pleasure, not for company, but because you defy me." He adjusted his cloak, his stance unchanged, as though her assault had been a gust of wind against a mountain. "Then you'll want forever," he replied, voice steady as he sat on her bed of soft silks. Celine's laughter rang, sharp and bright, echoing through the chamber. She drew the shard of Thalen up between them, its glow washing her face in eerie light. "Never?" she whispered. "Oh, my quiet mystery, never is such a dangerous word." Her hand trailed across his chest once more, softer now, almost reverent. Thinking to herself, "I'll peel you open one day." Celine only smiled, blood at her hip, fire in her veins, and intrigue burning hotter than lust. For the first time in years, someone had resisted her magic completely. And that, to her, was intoxicating. Chapter 2. The Scribe's Breath. The night air clung cold to their skin as Izzi and Kaelin dragged themselves from the water. The world beyond the temple was hushed, save for the distant clamor of guards scouring the inner docks. They had swum until their lungs burned, until the temple's lanterns were no more than trembling sparks across the waves. They stumbled over slick stones, seawater bleeding dark from their clothes. Izzi's chestnut hair hung in heavy ropes against her back, copper streaks glinting in the weak starlight. Her daggers were still wet, red running thin as tea down the hilts. Her violet-gray eyes were unfocused, pinned to the horizon as if Celine might still be there with her blade raised and that smile, like a cut. Kaelin led them toward the outer walls, a jagged ring of old fortifications that once kept the city's nightmares at bay. The nearest watchpost had long since sagged into ruin. Its crenellations were cracked, its roof open to the sky. Beneath the leeward side, tucked from the wind, they found a stone recess overlooking the Black Sea. With a grunt, Kaelin slid the greatsword from his shoulder and set it down beside him. The massive blade thunked against the stones, catching the meager light along a nicked, well-kept edge. He wrung seawater from his cloak and tore it into strips, then coaxed a stingy fire to life from driftwood and stubborn tinder. His movements were slow but sure, each one something solid to hang the moment on. Izzi remained standing. Arms folded tight across her chest, she stared out at the breathing dark. When her voice came, it was flattened, as if all the color had been pressed from it. I couldn't stop her. Kaelin watched a coal collapse and glow hotter. You nearly carved her to ribbons. No. The word landed like spittle. She turned, face cut sharp by firelight, strands of wet hair stuck to her cheek. She got away again, after everything she's taken. After... The image of Renlin folding around the rapier, of his body shouldered coldly into the water, stole whatever came next. Kaelin said nothing for a while. He fed the fire, the crackle filling the gap where words weren't ready yet. At last he rumbled. The boy still breathes. You gave him that. Izzi flinched. For how long? Long enough to matter, Kaelin said. His eyes caught hers across the fire. And that's more than most of us ever have. Izzi dropped to a crouch beside the fire, knees tight, heat biting her face. Her reopened hand throbbed beneath its crude wrap. She could feel the slip of her dagger leaving her grasp, the way the blood had slicked the hilt. The memory of the dock returned in shards, steel, a wet gurgle, the board's hollow drum under falling bodies. She closed her eyes. I felt it, she said into her palms. That coldness. When she smiled at me like I was still hers, when the guards rushed us, I wanted to let it take me. I almost did. Kaelin's gaze didn't waver. I saw, he said, low, and it scared the hells out of me. She looked at him, quick and vulnerable. And you still trust me? He huffed a breath that wasn't quite a laugh. I trust you because you're asking. Animals don't ask what they are. A beat, then, softer, and because I've watched you climb back from worse. Some tightness eased under her ribs. For a long moment they just listened. The little fire's pop, the lap of water far below, the murmur of a city pretending it had not bled. You always know what to say, she said, a corner of her mouth lifting despite the ache. Sometimes, he said, leaning back to the stone. Other times I'm just making noise so you don't brood yourself to death. A small sound, half laugh, half broken thing escaped her. The fire painted her face gold, then ember red. She looked into it, then stood with a sudden, clean resolve. I can't leave it like this. I have to know if he's alive. Kaelin tilted his head. And how do you plan to find him with half the temple roused? If he's alive, someone in those halls will know where they took him. She spoke quietly. Kaelin grunted. The great sword's broad pommel caught the flicker as he lifted it a hand's breadth, then let it settle again. You'll go whether I tell you no or not. Yes. He sighed through his nose, a gravelly sound. Then come back whole, or I'll climb those walls, carry your stubborn carcass out and bury you where the no-grass grows. Izzi's lips quirked, almost sweet. Go, he said, tossing another sliver of driftwood into the fire without looking at her. Before I think of smarter things to say. She pulled up her hood, checked the edges of her daggers by touch. For a heartbeat, she stood there in the wobbling light, and the night made her look like a figurine cast in brass, hard and fragile at once. Then she turned, and the dark accepted her. Kaelin watched the last ripple where she'd been. He settled with his back to the stone, angling the greatsword so its weight lay ready across his knees. Wind teased the fire, he fed it answered. Out beyond, the sea breathed in long, patient pulls. Don't let death drag you under, scribe, he muttered to the night. She'll pull the temple down by its teeth if you're gone. The fire answered with a pop, sending a small galaxy of sparks skyward. Above, the stars burned indifferent and steady, while the little blaze at the wall did its humble work. Warming a pair of wet boots, kissing steam from a great blade, and holding a vigil for a thief prowling the dark to bring a boy back to breath. The city was quiet, but not asleep. From the shadow of the outer wall, Izzi studied the temple rising against the night sky, its towers lit by wavering torches. The firelight carried far, gold trembling against pale stone, and beneath it the city seethed with movement. Patrols stalked the streets, their boots striking in grim rhythm, the hiss of steel, the bark of orders, the occasional flare of torchlight betrayed their restlessness. Izzi pulled her hood lower, steadying her breath. She could almost hear Celine's laughter caught on the sea breeze, mocking her, reminding her of the moment she'd slipped away. This isn't about her, she told herself. Not tonight. Tonight, it's him. Renlin's face burned in her memory, pale, shocked, eyes wide with confusion as the blade passed through him. She had seen too many men fall to wounds like that, too many bodies carried out cold. But Kaelin had dragged him from the water, and some stubborn part of her heart refused to accept it as his end. If the scribe still breathed, she would find him. Izzi's boots struck silently on the cobbles as she slipped from shadow to shadow, her body pressed close to the walls of houses and warehouses that clung near the temple's edge. Her movements were a hunter's, measured, sure, each pause long enough to listen. Somewhere above, a bell tolled, slow and heavy. Its echo rolled across the rooftops like the beating of a heart. Izzi vaulted the low wall bordering the temple grounds, landing soft in the grass. The courtyard stretched wide before her, framed by columns that reached into the night. Lanterns swung from hooks, their light swaying in circles across pale stone, catching in the carved reliefs of saints and warriors long forgotten. Voices drifted through the stillness, rough and low. 2 guards paced along the flagstones, spears clinking against their armor with every step. Another pair stood near the fountain at the courtyard's center, their torchlight throwing long shadows into the arches. Izzi pressed herself into the lee of a column, breath shallow, letting her eyes adjust to the patterns of their patrol. 10 of ours, cut down at the dock, one murmured, his voice heavy with unease. 10. No chance to cry out. The other spat into the grass. Whoever did it's still out there. We'll find them. Commander swears by dawn we'll have answers. Their boots scraped closer. Izzi flattened against the column, her heart a drum she forced into silence. The guards passed, their torchlight sliding just inches from where she stood. Another voice from the fountain. All 10. Dead like cattle. Whoever it was. Gods, they butchered 'em. Izzi shut her eyes. She could see them again, the blood slicking the boards, the bodies collapsing under her daggers. Her own hands sticky and red, the way her vision had narrowed to nothing but the rhythm of killing. She clenched her jaw, pushed it down, and moved. Silent as a shadow, she slipped from column to column, her body in perfect counterpoint to the guards' movements. Every breath of wind, every creak of leather became her map. The temple's great doors loomed just ahead, iron-banded and half-open. She waited, counted the guards' steps, then darted across the open flagstones, slipping into the dark maw of the temple's halls. The entry hall yawned wide before her, a cathedral of shadow and stone. High above, colored glass windows caught the moonlight, painting fractured blues and reds across the flagstones. Incense hung thick in the air, cloying, masking the underlying tang of oil and sweat. Izzi crouched low against the base of a pillar, letting her eyes sweep the chamber. There were more guards than she'd ever expected, far more than a temple should ever need. Pairs stalked the side aisles with lanterns swinging. 2 more crossed the nave, their armor catching the dim light. At the far doors leading deeper, 4 stood watch as if expecting an army to breach the sanctum. Too many, Izzi thought, teeth gritting. This isn't just defense, this is occupation. She stilled, breath slow, letting her ears take what her eyes could not. Bits of chatter drifted through the echoing space as men passed one another, voices kept low but carrying nonetheless. Still searching the docks. Nothing left but blood on the boards. No word from the healers yet. If the boy lives, it'll be a miracle. Master Celine's already gone. Ship left with the tide, back to her keep across the sea, I suppose. That last phrase hit Izzi like a blow to the ribs. She pressed tighter into the pillar's shadow, jaw working. Celine had vanished from under her blades only hours ago, but already she was leagues away, safe in whatever lair she crawled back to. Her fingers twitched against the hilt of her dagger. She could almost feel Celine's warmth in her grasp again, the moment she'd driven steel into her hip. She bit down on the thought, hard. The guards passed, their lantern light trailing, their words falling to silence. Izzi slipped along the base of the pillars, counting their numbers, their rhythms, their blind spots. Too many, but not enough to stop me. Ahead, the hall split into corridors, one climbing toward the upper sanctum, the other veering off toward the healer's wing where she prayed Renlin had been carried. A sudden creak of hinges drew Izzi back into the column's shadow. A side door opened, spilling a slice of lamplight into the hall. A healer emerged, her arms laden with bundles of herbs and glass vials that clinked together with each hurried step. Her white robes were stained with dark patches at the cuffs, the hem dragging across the stone. Izzi's eyes narrowed. Healers move where the blood calls them, like a shadow slipping from one pool of darkness to the next. She followed, her boots silent against the cold floor. The healer's sandals slapped in a desperate rhythm, her breath coming quick as she pushed through another door at the hall's end. Izzi slipped in just as it began to swing shut. The smell struck her first, iron and sweat, heavy in the air. Rows of cots lined the long chamber, but most were still, each draped with pale sheets pulled to the chin. The stench of death hung thick, unmoving. Only one man yet clung to life. He lay beneath the fevered hands of the healer, his chest bound in layer upon layer of blood-soaked cloth. His skin was waxen, his breath shallow and quick, lips trembling with each effort to draw air. The healer muttered under her breath as she pressed fresh poultices into the wound, herbs crushed dark between her fingers. "I won't lose another," the woman hissed, almost a prayer, almost a command. "Not another one tonight." Izzi's chest tightened as her gaze swept the chamber. 10 men, the 10 she had cut down, their faces slack now, their mouths still open in their final gasps. The sight pressed on her ribs like a weight. In battle they had been obstacles, here they were reminders. Her fingers curled around the hilt of her dagger, nails biting into her palm. She slipped back into shadow, breath steadying, and crept along the passage. Door after door lined the hall, some open with torchlight flickering, others locked and silent. Every hinge she leaned against whispered, every breath risked discovery. She stopped, pressed her ear against a heavy door. And there it was. Faint, so faint she almost thought it the groaning of timbers in the night. A voice, weak, broken, mumbling in shallow bursts. Izzi froze, every nerve in her body screamed recognition. The door creaked when she pushed it open, just enough to slip inside. The room was dim, lit by a single guttering candle that leaned in its brass holder. Shadows clung thick against the walls, and the air smelled of salt, blood, and crushed herbs. Renlin lay on a narrow cot, his frame too small for the wound that had been carved into him. His chest was swaddled in layers of fresh bandages, dark with seeping blood, each rise and fall of his ribs tugging at the stitches that crisscrossed the wound beneath. Izzi's breath caught as she pulled the wrappings up, just enough to see the ugly slash beneath. Flesh drawn together by thick healer's thread, still wet, still pulsing with fragile life. She lowered the cloth back into place, her hands trembling. A damp rag had been set across his brow, but even with it, heat poured from his skin. His lips parted, mumbling words too soft to make sense, his breath stuttering with the effort. Izzi sat at his side, her hand hovering over his without quite daring to take it. Relief swelled in her chest, sharp and aching, until she thought she might collapse from it. Against all reason, against all odds, he was alive. "Renlin," she whispered, the name soft on her tongue. For a moment she wanted nothing more than to stay, to keep vigil until his eyes opened, to hear him stammer through his thoughts the way he always did, to see that awkward half-smile that had somehow brightened even the darkest parts of the road. But Celine's face rose behind her eyes, silver eyes like knives, the whisper of her voice in Izzi's mind, the pull of that cold fury that lived in her chest. The horrors Celine had already wrought on her once, and the promise of more to come. Izzi swallowed, forcing the ache down. Renlin didn't belong in that world, her world. The boy was a scholar, a seeker of words and history. Not a blade, not a shield. He deserved the chance to heal, to stay behind these walls and live a life untouched by the ruin she and Kaelin carried in their wake. Renlin stirred, his head twitching weakly against the damp cloth. His lips moved again, the sound a broken murmur. "Leora." Izzi blinked. The name meant nothing, but the way he spoke it, with need, with tethered hope, carved a line straight through her. She remembered the whispers of his visits to the library, the way he had spent hours buried in its halls. Whoever Leora was, she must have been tied to that place. Izzi leaned close, brushing her lips against his fevered temple before letting them linger at his cheek. "I'll find them for you," she whispered. "Rest now, scribe. Let this world keep you safe." As she drew back, her eyes caught something in the corner, a glimmer of steel propped against the wall. Her rapier, polished by temple hands, leaned against a chair as if waiting to be reclaimed. She stood, crossed the room, and took it in hand. For a long moment she weighed it, the familiar balance, the scars on the hilt where her grip had worn grooves into the leather. Every mile she had walked with Kaelin, every fight, every stolen breath of freedom, this blade had been there. She turned, looking at Renlin lying still, stitches holding him together. Slowly, deliberately, she set the rapier down at the foot of his bed. It was his now, a reminder that what they had endured together was real, that he had not imagined his place among them, however brief. Izzi lingered one last time, her hand brushing his arm, before she slipped from the room like smoke. Izzi eased the door shut behind her, letting the latch settle with the softest click. She pressed her back to the wall, eyes closing for a moment as she let the breath shudder from her lungs. Renlin was alive. Against everything, he was still here. A sudden sound snapped her eyes open. the sharp squeak of hinges, the swish of robes. From down the corridor, the healer she had followed earlier slipped quickly out of the ward where the guards lay. Her arms were streaked with blood to the elbows, her pace brisk, almost desperate, as if the work inside pressed too close to bear. Izzi flattened herself into the shadows of a side arch, breath caught tight in her throat. The healer's sandals slapped the stone as she moved past. Then came another voice, deep and rasping with authority. "How are my men?" The Temple Lord Commander. Izzi didn't need to see him to know. His voice carried the weight of command, and the strain of a man who had already counted too many dead. The healer's reply was weary, her words breaking under the strain. "Only one. I could save only one." A heavy silence fell. Then the commander swore, the sound like steel dragged across stone. "Justice will be done. Whoever did this will pay in blood." Izzi closed her eyes, her jaw tightening. Images of the dock surged back, blades flashing, throats opening, bodies collapsing in the lamplight. She had told herself it was necessary, that Celine's escape left her no choice. But now the echo of those words, "only one," gnawed in her gut. If they knew it was me. The commander's voice dropped low, a growl meant for his men alone. She didn't wait to hear more. She slipped from the archway and moved on, her boots whispering over the stones. The streets were hollow when she left the temple behind. Lanterns guttered low, their flames shrunk to embers, and the cobbles gleamed with the sheen of night dew. Every footstep echoed more than she liked, bouncing off shuttered windows and crooked doorways. A stray cat darted across the road, tail lashing, vanishing into a gap between stone. Izzi pulled her hood tighter. The adrenaline was wearing thin, and weariness pressed at the edges of her bones. She thought of the small fire on the outer wall, Kalen sitting cross-legged with his greatsword across his knees, waiting. She could almost hear his voice already, dry and rumbling in the back of her mind. "Day late, Iz. Thought you'd finally gotten yourself killed." Her lips tugged into the faintest smile, though her chest still ached. She would face his scolding soon enough. For now, the city belonged to her alone. When dawn broke, it came slow and gray, light spilling over the tiled roofs until the sky warmed to pale gold. By the time the library's heavy doors creaked open, Izzi was already waiting, leaning in the archway across the street with her arms folded, watching. The library was vast, its facade a lattice of stone arches and carved saints, the doors iron-banded and heavy. Inside, the air was thick with the perfume of parchment and old wood. Shafts of new sunlight pierced through tall windows, gilding dust motes in their path. Rows upon rows of shelves stretched into the dim, each stacked with books, scrolls, and maps that whispered the lives of 1,000 years. Izzi wandered between them, her steps light, her eyes scanning faces. Scholars shuffled past, clutching stacks of tomes. Apprentices carried ladders, their arms full of bundled manuscripts. A woman in green robes hunched over a lectern, lips moving as she traced lines of text with her finger. Izzi put on her brightest smile, the kind that cracked open doors better than any lockpick. She asked casually, with a tilt of her head and a disarming laugh, if anyone knew of a Leora. A patron? A scribe? A healer? She wasn't sure. Most shook their heads or shrugged, but Izzi kept at it, dropping the name here and there like a coin into an open palm. Eventually, an older man with ink-stained fingers squinted at her, tilting his head toward the far stacks. "Aye, you'll be looking for the girl who keeps to the eastern alcove. Brown hair, blue eyes, always buried in something thicker than her arms can carry." Izzi thanked him with a wink that made the old man chuckle despite himself. She followed the direction given, weaving deeper into the shelves where light grew thin and quiet. The air smelled of vellum and dust, and the hush of the place seemed to press even tighter the farther she went. There, a figure bent over a spread of books, the candlelight haloing her hair. Izzi slowed, one hand brushing the edge of a shelf, the other drifting near her dagger more out of habit than need. Her violet-gray eyes narrowed as she studied the girl, her lips parted to speak. Izzi slowed at the edge of the alcove, her steps quiet as falling dust. The girl bent over the books was younger than she expected, though not by much, perhaps a year or two Renlin's senior. Brown hair spilled across her shoulders, lit in warm strands by the candle at her elbow. She had the kind of stillness Izzi envied, a patience that let her eyes sink into the page as though the world beyond it didn't exist. Even from here, Izzi could see what Renlin must have. A softness, unassuming yet impossible to ignore, the faint curve of her lips as she mouthed the words she read, the way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear without looking up, wholly at home in this temple of words. There was beauty there, but more than that, gentleness, a light that cut against the blood and ruin Izzi carried on her skin. For a moment, she almost forgot why she'd come. Leora's head lifted suddenly, eyes catching Izzi's. They were clear, blue like an ocean, sharp with curiosity. She frowned, not unkindly, as she rose from her bench. "Can I help you with something?" Leora's blue eyes stayed on Izzi, curious but cautious. "Can I help you with something?" she asked again, her voice soft but steady. Izzi tilted her head, letting an easy smile curl across her lips. "Maybe, though you look like you're already deep in better company." She nodded at the stack of books beside Leora, tomes so tall they threatened to topple. "What's caught you so entranced?" Leora glanced down, smoothing the page with her hand. "Histories, mostly naval accounts, some old temple records. Not many bother with them." She gave a small shrug, almost embarrassed. "Naval accounts," Izzi mused, stepping closer, her fingers trailing idly along the spine of a book on the shelf. "You've got more patience than me. My tastes run toward things a little livelier." That earned her a small laugh, light and genuine. Izzi felt the sound settle in her chest. Though Izzi went on, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "I do have a friend who eats that kind of thing up. Dareth Melkor, for example. He never shuts up about the man's work." At the name, Leora's face brightened with unmistakable recognition. "Dareth? I've been reading so much of him these past few days. I had someone to go through it with. He insisted on showing me the texts." Her words softened, as if she were talking about something precious. Izzi let her smile linger, but inside, the answer sealed itself like a lock clicking into place. She reached into her cloak, fingers brushing parchment. "That sounds just like him," she said lightly, pressing the folded paper into Leora's hand. "Keep this close. It's about your friend." Confusion flickered across Leora's face, but she unfolded the parchment anyway. Her eyes scanned quickly, the words striking harder with each line. Her lips parted in shock. "He's in the temple's ward?" She looked up, startled. Wait, who are you?" But the alcove was empty. The candle flickered, casting her shadow long against the wall. Leora clutched the parchment, heart pounding, the echo of violet-gray eyes and a fleeting smile still lingering where the stranger had stood. Leora clutched the parchment to her chest, her steps quick and uncertain as she left the library behind. Izzi followed at a distance, her hood drawn low, weaving through the thinning morning crowds. The temple loomed ahead, its spires pale in the dawn light. Leora slowed at its gates, nerves written plain in her face, before finally squaring her shoulders and stepping inside. Izzi slipped into a narrow lane opposite, climbing a stack of crates until she perched in a high window frame with a clear view of the ward's entry. Minutes passed. Then the doors opened. Leora stood there, speaking with the healers, parchment trembling faintly in her hand. They studied her with wary eyes, but after a hushed exchange, one nodded and led her through. Izzi shifted, leaning closer to watch through the warped glass. There, in the dim chamber where she had left him, Renlin lay pale and still, chest rising in shallow rhythm. Leora paused at the threshold as though afraid her presence might shatter him. Then, slowly, she crossed the room and sank to her knees at his side. Her hand found his, small fingers curling around his bandaged knuckles. She bent her head, shoulders trembling, and wept silently while he slept, her tears falling onto the cloth across his chest. Izzi's throat tightened. "Curious what kind of trouble you've stumbled into," she thought, eyes tracing the fragile picture below. The scribe and the girl who read too much, bound together in something gentler than her world ever allowed. The sight eased something deep in her chest. Renlin wasn't alone. Slipping back into the shadows, Izzi climbed down from her perch and melted into the waking streets. By the time she reached the outer walls, the sun had fully risen, setting the horizon aflame with pale gold. Kalen would be waiting, greatsword across his knees, that scowl etched into his face. He would give her the scolding she deserved, and she would meet it with a grin. For now, though, she carried a rare weight of relief. Renlin was alive. Chapter 3. On the road again. The campfire had burned down to ash when Izzi crested the outer wall. Kalen sat exactly as she pictured him, back braced against a crumbling stone, greatsword stretched across his knees. Eyes half-lidded but sharp enough to catch her the instant she came into view. He didn't rise, didn't even shift, just tilted his head slightly, tusked mouth curling into the faintest smirk. "Day late, Iz," he rumbled. "Thought you'd finally gotten yourself killed." Izzi tugged her hood back, copper-streaked hair catching the dawn. She dropped into a crouch by the ashes, rubbing her chilled hands together. "Almost. But you'll be glad to know our scribe still breathes. The healers have him tied together with enough thread to stitch a sail and… She hesitated, voice softening. He's got someone. Someone who'll stay at his side. Kaylin's scarred brow arched. So, what are we doing about him? Izzi met his eyes across the dying coals. He belongs in this world, Kaylin, not ours. If he follows us, Celine, our pasts will get him. Better he heals, with someone who can keep him grounded. For a long moment, Kaylin said nothing, only shifted the greatsword until it rested beside him. Finally, he gave a slow nod, the corners of his mouth twitching downward. For once, I agree. Relief tugged at her chest, though she smothered it under a grin. Mark the day. We actually agreed on something. Kaylin grunted. Don't get used to it. He reached for the pouch at his belt and shook it once. The jingle was thin, hollow. Speaking of things not to get used to, how much coin have you got left? Izzi winced, patting the pouch at her hip. The silence was answer enough. Kaylin barked a short laugh. That bad, eh? I've only enough for a few loaves of bread myself. Maybe a mug of piss-poor ale if the barkeep's feeling generous. Izzi sighed, tipping her head back toward the pale sky. Well, Horian did make you an offer. Said we should mention his name at Cerulea's rest. Kaylin's face flattened, unimpressed. That loud-mouthed sellsword? I doubt he even remembers saying it. Probably shouted it just to hear his own voice echo. Izzi smirked, leaning forward, her elbows on her knees. Maybe, but we can't stay here. Not with Celine's shadow hanging over the city, not with the guards sniffing for blood. Cerulea's rest is far enough we can breathe, if only for a moment. And if Horian's full of hot air, well, we'll scrounge up coin once we get there. Kaylin studied her for a long moment, then shrugged, the weight of his shoulders like stone rolling off a hill. A break, huh? You've earned one. We both have. He pushed himself to his feet, greatsword sliding into place across his back. Let's go find this paradise. If nothing else, we'll eat better than charred fish and crusts of bread. Izzi stood, brushing ash from her hands, her smile tinged with both weariness and stubborn hope. Cerulea's rest, then. Together, they turned from the ruins of the wall, the city shrinking behind them as the road stretched ahead. They left the city as dusk bled into night, the road a ribbon of shale and dust, unwinding beneath a sky pricked with early stars. Wind combed the grass in silver waves. Crickets stitched a thin, busy music at the hedgerows. Izzi walked a half-stride ahead, hood up, hands tucked into her cloak. Kaylin's greatsword rode his back like a slab of moonlight, catching every stray glimmer. They spoke little at first. The quiet wasn't strain, it was a long breath after a held one. By dawn, the world softened. Fields lifted into low hills, dotted with sheep and the occasional bent stone marker that had forgotten the name it once kept. Kaylin's shoulders eased as nothing leapt from the ditch for once. No irons singing out of brush or bracken. First stretch of road in months that hasn't tried to kill us, he said, almost cheerful in his gravel way. Izzi arched an eyebrow. Careful. If the road hears you, it'll get ideas. Day rolled over day. Noon heat baked the dust into their boots. Evening cooled it to powder. They ate where they could. Hard cheese, tougher bread, and traded dry jokes the way other travelers trade water. Somewhere along the second dusk, when the sky went the color of bruised plums, they crested a hill and saw the sea again. This time not as a black maw under a temple, but as a copper sheet winking with sails. The port town below spilled in a crooked fan around its harbor. Gull's Hook, Kaylin read off a sun-cracked post, where a painted bird with a fish in its beak had faded to ghost gray. Ropes hung like thick cobwebs between bollards. Nets steamed on racks. Tar, kelp, and wood smoke braided into a smell that bit and warmed in equal measure. They threaded the alleys toward the docks. Ships swayed at anchor, fat-bellied cogs with patched sails, a sleek caravel preening in the center berth like a rich man's dagger, and lean coastal craft that looked fast even while moored. Out beyond the harbor's teeth of rock, sunlight dazzled off a scatter of white hulls headed for the glitter on the horizon. Cerulea's rest lies there, a dockhand offered when Izzi asked, pointing with a tar-black fingernail. Island and town both. Pretty as a painting, if you can afford the paint. They found a captain in a salt-stiff coat trimming a ledger with a knife. His beard was tarred into a neat wedge. Gold hoops winked in both ears. Passage? He drawled, not looking up yet. Deck or cabin? Deck will do. Izzi said, turning her easiest smile on him. 2 of us. We don't take much space. He named a price that could have bought a mule and a saddle besides. Izzi's smile thinned. That seems ambitious. Sea's rough, he said blandly, though the water lay flat as hammered pewter. His eyes slid up, took Izzi in with a slow, weighing look that made Kaylin's jaw set. Unless you mean to make yourselves useful. He let the words hang, ugly as bilge. Put on a show for the crew, sweetheart. Strip the fare down. Kaylin shifted. The greatsword's hilt rasped against his shoulder. Izzi laid 2 fingers on his wrist without looking, a touch light as a moth. Her smile didn't crack, but it cooled to glass. We'll try our luck elsewhere. Luck's expensive, the captain called after them. Then he can keep it, Izzi said, and turned her back on his ship. They walked in silence for a while, letting the slap of water against pilings and the crank of winches rinse the moment away. The town around the harbor woke to afternoon swagger. Hawkers barked over baskets of sardines and scallops. A boy ran past with a string of tin bells. A woman in a blue apron thumped loaves onto a stall. The signboards creaked, painted fish and anchors knocking softly. They ducked beneath one that read, "The Brine and Bell," a squat tavern with a leeward lean and a bell hung over the bar that looked as if it had once lived on a ship. Inside, air hugged close, ale and brine, wood and sweat, a hint of frying onions. Sawdust sopped spills on the floor. Scrimshaw tusks lined a shelf, etched with whales and storms. A 2-string fiddle sawed patient notes in the corner, while a sailor thumped time with a boot heel. Plan? Kaylin asked, eyeing the room's board with its curl of posted work. Deck hands wanted, rat catcher needed, guard for warehouse nights. Coin, Izzi said. Any way we can earn it and keep our skin. You can win some on that arm of yours. She nodded toward a table where 2 bruisers grunted over an arm wrestle, coins bright as fish scales and a little tied around their elbows. I'll see if these fine patrons enjoy a game with a few friendly wagers, or a demonstration. Not the stripping sort, Kaylin said dryly. Rot off, Izzi muttered, but her grin flashed, quick and wicked. She made a small stage of a vacant barrel, set a bottle on its side, then another balanced on the first. A third she perched at a tilt like a gull about to lift. A little crowd drew in on curiosity alone. Knife throwers appear now and again in ports, but few move like river water. Izzi let her fingers trail over the hilts at her belt, drew, flipped, and sent a blade humming. It pinned the first bottle's cork without shattering the glass. Coins clicked as someone approved. Another knife skated, sliced a curl of label from the second. Murmurs thickened. At the far table, Kaylin's great paw clasped a fisherman's, elbows dug into scarred oak. The first contest cracked the table like thunder. The fisherman's hand went down so fast his eyes lagged behind it. Laughter, a groan, more coins. Another challenger, thicker in the wrists, tucked a lucky charm beneath his palm and glared. Kaylin smiled like a cliff barely, and let the man strain a long, burning moment before pressing him to the wood with the steady patience of tide. Izzi caught the barkeep's eye between throws. A cut for the house if we can keep the games tidy. You keep 'em buying and you've got your stage, the woman said, polishing a pewter mug with a bit of clean rag. No fights I have to fix. Wouldn't dream of it, Izzi said, and sent the next knife shaving a clean ring around the topmost bottle so the glass cap slipped off and landed upright. The little bell over the bar clanged as someone slapped it in delight. Mugs lifted, Kaylin's table roared. By evening, the place hummed. Coins chimed into Izzi's palm. Kaylin's stack grew slow and honest. The fiddle stitched faster tunes. The day had begun rusted with refusal, but as dusk slid in through the windows and turned the room to warm amber, their shoulders loosened. Not rich, but not empty. Enough to imagine a berth on a morning tide. Izzi leaned against the bar to tally their small fortune. 2 nights of this, she said, low so only Kaylin heard, and we buy our way to paradise. Paradise? Kaylin repeated, side-eyeing the bruise-purple sky through the pane. We'll see if it lives up to name. Even if it doesn't, Izzi said, flipping a coin and catching it on the back of her knuckles. It'll be better than now. Kaylin grunted assent. Somewhere outside, a ship's bell tolled the hour. Inside, the tavern's own bell answered, bright and brassy. For once, the night felt like it might pass without teeth. The Brine and Bell was still humming when the harbor bell outside pealed a new arrival. Voices tilted, chairs scraped. Half the room craned toward the windows. Izzi and Kaylin slipped back into the salt air just as a lean cutter nosed between the pilings. Low in the water, sails the pale gray of a fog bank, her hull clean as a knife. A woman in a weathered coat strode down the gangplank with a bosun at her shoulder, barking orders that sounded like second nature and good sense. Izzi fell in beside her with an easy smile. "Cerulea's Rest. What's your price for 2 on deck?" The captain flicked a measuring look over them. Izzi's traveling leathers gone threadbare, Kaelin's greatsword broad as a barn door, and named a fare that made Izzi's brows lift. "That's considerably kinder than what we heard earlier," Izzi said. The captain snorted. "Some captains tax gulls for the privilege of flying. I don't. Tide turns within the hour. Decide fast." They didn't need a council. Between Kaelin's arm-wrestled winnings and Izzi's knife-show purse, they scraped the silver into the captain's palm until only a handful of coins clinked lonely in Izzi's pouch. "Not rich, but afloat." "Deck," Kaelin said. "Deck," the captain agreed, already turning. "Stow your kit, keep clear of the lines, and don't argue with the sea." They climbed aboard with the last of the light. Dock hands kicked the lines free. Blocks squealed, canvas bellied with a satisfied whump as the wind took it. Gull's hook slipped backward, then dwindled, then was only a smudge on the edge of the world. The cutter's bow rose and fell with a long, easy motion, spray kissing their faces. Salt wind pulled at Izzi's braid and tugged a rare smile out of Kaelin. They stood at the rail, elbows near, watching the water change from pewter to indigo to velvet. Rigging hummed a thin, contented chord above them. Somewhere aft, a sailor laughed the laugh of a man with a warm mug waiting at Land's End. Izzi breathed deep. "If paradise is a lie, I don't want the truth for a day or two." "What are you hoping for?" Kaelin asked, squinting at the pale smear on the horizon that might have been cloud or island or promise. "People," she said without hesitation. "Crowds I can vanish into. Laughter in the streets. A cove so clear you can count the shells on the bottom. I want to swim until the salt lives in my hair and my skin forgets what blood feels like." Kaelin's mouth tugged into something that wasn't quite a grin. "Food," he said. "Bowls that steam. Fish that flakes under a fork. Bread that doesn't fight back. A bed that doesn't remember the last dozen shoulders that fell on it wrong. And soft sheets?" Izzi teased. "I'd settle for a mattress that isn't a stack of regrets," he rumbled. She chuckled, letting the sound be stolen by the wind. "Deal. You get your feast and your soft bed. I'll find the warmest water and the loudest music. Maybe even a dance I don't have to watch my back through." "Watch it anyway," Kaelin said, but there was no edge to it, only habit and a man who'd made vigilance a kind of love. They fell quiet, watching the sea lift and lay itself down again. The cutter drove on, the island growing by inches, then by breaths. For once, the world did not gnash its teeth around them. The breeze smelled of ropes and open water. The future tasted like salt and something almost sweet. Night settled like velvet, the sea rolling calm beneath a sky pricked with stars. Lanterns swung along the rigging, their light pooling gold on salt-wet planks. Izzi and Kaelin leaned against the rail, half listening as the crew swapped stories over mugs and salted meat. One voice rose above the others, cracked with age but rich, carrying. The man who owned it sat cross-legged near the mast. His skin seemed like old rope, one eye cloudy and the other sharp as flint. A circle of sailors leaned in, the way children lean toward a fire. "Mark me," he rasped, tapping a bony finger against the deck. "It's not the storms you fear, nor the reefs. It's the songs. Sweet as honey, soft as your mother's voice. But it'll drag you under quicker than iron." A younger sailor scoffed. "You mean sirens?" The old man's good eye gleamed. "Aye, seen 'em. Hair like seaweed, teeth white as cut shells. They sing, and the sea sings with 'em. Men leap into the waves grinnin' like fools, thinkin' they're swimmin' into a lover's arms. Naught but bones left on the rocks when the tide pulls back." A hush lingered after his words, broken only by the creak of rigging. Even Kaelin leaned forward, the greatsword across his knees, brows furrowed. Izzi smirked faintly, breaking the spell. "And what stopped you from leaping, old salt? Don't tell me you were too clever for a goddess's song." The old man gave a grin with more gaps than teeth. "Nay, too drunk to hear it proper. Rum saved me where prayers wouldn't." The crew laughed, but it was the laughter of men who laughed to shake off a shiver. Kaelin rumbled. "Drunk or not, I'd keep my ears plugged if we crossed such waters." "Best pray you do," the old sailor muttered, his gaze drifting back to the horizon. The moment lingered, the whisper of the waves, the imagined sound of voices beneath them, until another sailor broke it with a slap of dice against wood. "Stories are good, but dice don't lie. Who's in?" Izzi's ears pricked, and the edge of her grin returned. She pushed off the rail, brushing hair from her face. Now that sounds like my kind of prayer. Kaelin groaned, but didn't move as Izzi joined the little circle around a barrel, sailors already clattering coins into the pot. The dice were bone, pitted and worn smooth at the corners, the kind that carried as much superstition as chance. "You've the look of one who cheats," said a broad-shouldered deckhand, eyeing her daggers. Izzi winked. "Only when the stakes are worth it." She tossed a coin into the pile. "But I play fair to start." Kaelin stayed at the rail, shaking his head, though a faint curl of amusement tugged at his mouth as he watched her settle in. The barrel made a fine table, scarred and ringed with salt stains. Dice clattered across its top, bouncing off the rim into the circle of waiting hands. Lantern light gleamed on eager eyes and the small stack of coins that grew heavier with every round. Izzi leaned in, elbows on the wood, her smile as sharp as the blades she carried. "So how's it played?" "Simple," said the deckhand across from her, a broad fellow with a scar through his brow. "Highest sum wins the pot. Tie goes to another round." "Luck decides all?" Izzi teased, already fishing a dagger from her belt to twirl idly between her fingers. The scarred sailor snorted. "Luck, or the gods, depends which you trust." "Neither," Izzi said, flashing her teeth. "But I've been known to make my own." The dice passed to her. She gave them a lazy shake, fingers caressing the bone like she meant to whisper secrets into them, then tossed. They rolled clean, tumbling to a stop on a 6 and a 5. 11, someone muttered. "Not bad." Scarbrow took his turn. 9. Another sailor. 7. The pot slid toward Izzi, who collected the coins with a neat sweep, bowing her head as if in prayer. "Second round." More coins tossed in, more laughter. Izzi's dice tumbled again, landing this time on a neat double 6. Gasps, groans, muttered curses. "Impossible!" Scarbrow growled, narrowing his eyes. "Twice in a row?" Izzi only shrugged, plucking a coin from the pile and rolling it across her knuckles in a lazy arc. "Blame the gods, not me. Maybe they're smiling tonight, or maybe your fingers are quicker than your dice." Before the tension could snap, Kaelin's voice rolled from the rail, dry as sand. "She cheats only when the stakes are high. You lot aren't rich enough for her trouble." Laughter broke the suspicion. A sailor shoved the dice toward Kaelin. "Then let's see if your friend's any better. Put those arms to use off the rope." Kaelin sighed, heavy as an anchor, and came to the barrel. He dropped a coin into the pot, one of Izzi's winnings, and scooped the dice into his palm. They looked absurdly small in his thick fingers. He shook once, rolled. 2 6s. The sailors erupted, half cheering, half cursing. Izzi's laugh bubbled bright, spilling into the night air. "Seems the gods like him better." Kaelin only grunted, sweeping the coins into a pouch without ceremony. "Guess I play straighter than you." "Straighter, duller, heavier," Izzi said, nudging him with her elbow. "But I'll forgive it, since you just doubled our purse." The sailors clamored for another round, but Kaelin shook his head, already turning back to the rail. "Best to leave the gods wanting more." Izzi winked at the circle, sweeping a coin into the barkeep's palm for good measure, and followed. Behind them, dice clattered again, laughter chasing them across the deck. They leaned side by side against the rail as the cutter pressed into the night. The sea hissed below, stars wheeled above, and for the first time in weeks their pockets jingled with more than dust. Izzi and Kaelin had claimed their corner of quiet at the rail. The sea stretched endless, black as polished glass, reflecting a scatter of stars so bright they seemed close enough to pluck from the sky. Izzi leaned on her forearms, the salt wind teasing strands of copper hair loose from her braid. Her violet-gray eyes were turned upward, searching constellations she only half remembered. Kaelin stood beside her, his great bulk a wall of calm. For once, he looked less like a sentinel and more like a man simply present. Neither spoke for a long while. The hush was enough. Finally, Izzi let out a low laugh, soft as the tide. "If this is what peace feels like, I almost don't trust it." Kaelin glanced at her, his tusked mouth twitching into the faintest smirk. "You never do." She turned her head toward him, her grin tired but real. "True. Maybe that's why I keep you around. You're good at reminding me not to." The silence after wasn't heavy, only comfortable. They let the sea's rhythm rock them into something gentler than sleep. By the time dawn bled into the horizon, the cutter was already gliding toward its destination. Cerulea's Rest rose from the sea like a dream, an island cradled in pale light. white sand beaches curved into turquoise coves so clear the seabed gleamed like glass. Slopes of emerald forest climbed inland, dotted with villas painted in blues and golds, their tiled roofs glinting in the morning sun. Fishing boats bobbed in the harbor, bright sails snapping like banners, while gulls wheeled overhead in raucous welcome. Izzi's breath caught, unguarded. "Gorgeous," she murmured. "Almost makes you forget the world out there." Kaylin leaned both elbows on the rail, squinting toward the port. "Beds first, food second. Then maybe I'll look at the view." Izzi laughed, a sound that mingled with the wind and gulls and the slap of waves against the hull. For a heartbeat, with Cerulea's Rest glowing before them like a jewel cast upon the sea, it felt as though the past could not follow. Chapter 4. Cerulea's Rest. The moment Izzi's boots touched the dock, she threw her arms wide as if she might embrace the entire island. Salt wind tangled her hair, sunlight struck her eyes until they glowed, and the words tumbled out of her in a rush. "God's above, look at it." And truly, there was nothing else to do but look. The waters of Cerulea's Rest gleamed the bluest she had ever seen, clear as glass and alive with darting fish that shimmered like silver coins in the shallows. White sands curved along the shoreline like spilled pearls, broken here and there by palms that leaned lazily into the breeze. Villas painted in seafoam greens and sun-washed golds climbed the hillsides, their tiled roofs flashing like gems in the morning sun. Closer, the dockside streets thrummed with color and sound. Vendors stirred steaming pots of mussels and squid, their broth hissing with herbs and wine. Skewers of roasted fish snapped and crackled above charcoals, the smoke rich and mouth-watering. Barrels of oranges and pomegranates glowed red and gold, piled so high it seemed impossible they wouldn't topple. Wine shops spilled laughter into the streets, their doors yawning wide onto taverns where the drink ran like rivers, and every face seemed sun-kissed, untroubled and smiling. Kaylin paused beside her, filling his lungs with the savory smoke drifting from a beachside stall. His shoulders eased as though every inch of him, scar, steel and all, had been waiting for this. "Smells like heaven," he rumbled. Izzi spun slowly on her heel, arms still outstretched, watching the crowd swirl past. Women in linen dresses carried baskets brimming with citrus. Bronzed sailors with rings in their ears bargained with jewel-eyed merchants. Children ran barefoot, laughing, their skin golden from the sea. Not a one bore the shadow of Selene, or the stain of battle. Everyone was beautiful here, as though the island had blessed them for staying. Izzi let her arms drop at last, grinning sideways at Kaylin. "Gods, even the drunkards look like they belong on a mural. And us," she plucked at her salt-stiff cloak and wrinkled her nose. "We look like we washed up with the tide." Kaylin snorted, adjusting the greatsword strapped across his back. "We did." For a heartbeat, they both simply stood there, taking it all in. The waters, the sands, the scent of wine and roasting fish, the sound of gulls wheeling above the laughter of a people who lived as though the world beyond the island didn't exist. Izzi drew a slow breath, her smile softening. Maybe paradise isn't such a lie after all. The dock spilled them into a cobbled main street wide enough for wagons but given over now to stalls and wandering feet. Linen awnings stretched in bright stripes overhead, dappling the road with patches of shade. Every step brought a new perfume, jasmine woven into garlands, sea brine, the smoke of roasting meats. Music drifted too, lilting from a minstrel with a lute, caught up in the laughter of a crowd gathered around him. Izzi walked with her head turning every which way, her eyes greedy for color. "I swear, Kaylin, even the stones are brighter here." He grunted, though his gaze lingered on a spit turning slowly over coals, fat dripping onto flame. "Stones I'll leave to you. Food's what's worth the paint." The street narrowed, then widened again as they stepped into a plaza where the air shimmered in brightness. At its center rose a fountain, marble figures of dolphins and mermaids arcing together to spill water that flashed silver in the sun. Children chased each other around its rim, shrieking with joy while old men played dice in its shade. Beyond the plaza, the view broke open in a sweep of pure blue. The beach stretched out below them, white and gold, with sails scattered across the horizon like tossed petals. Izzi slowed, then stopped altogether. She tilted her face toward the sky and spread her arms again as though she might drink the whole sight down. "This," she said, her voice soft but certain, "is what we should have been born to. Not iron gates, not blood in the water. This." Kaelin came to stand beside her, broad shoulders cutting a sharp silhouette against the brilliance beyond. For once, there was no scowl in his face, only a kind of wary ease, like a wolf realizing it could lower its hackles for a moment. "If paradise had a face," he rumbled, "I'd say this is close." Izzi glanced at him sidelong, grinning. "Close? Kaelin, look at them." She gestured at the laughing children, the fountain spray catching the sun like diamonds, the vendors shouting cheerfully across the square. Every single one of them looks like they haven't known a day of darkness in their lives. Tell me that isn't paradise. Kaelin let out a long breath through his nose, as if conceding. His stomach growled loud enough to draw a few nearby stares. He gave a lopsided shrug. Paradise could start with a meal. Izzi laughed, the sound bright, and for the first time in a long while, it wasn't sharpened by edge or bitterness. Izzi leaned her elbows on the fountain's rim, fingers trailing through the cool spray. The plaza hummed around them. Laughter, music, gulls crying above. Beyond, the beach stretched in brilliant arcs of white, kissed by the turquoise tide. Kaelin's ears twitched, his head turning slightly. A grin tugged at his tusked mouth. "Ah, I know that voice," he said. Izzi tilted her head, following his gaze. "What voice?" Kaelin's smirk widened. "The kind that rattles the air whether you want it to or not." They drifted toward the overlook, peering down at the stretch of sand. And there he was. Horian Hale in all his boisterous, sunlit glory. He wore light shorts cut just above the knee, showing off legs bronzed by travel. A thin linen shirt hung open down the middle, fluttering in the breeze, leaving his chest bare enough to reveal hard muscle and a mat of chest hair darkened by salt water. He stood barefoot in the sand, shoulders gleaming, hair tossed carelessly by the sea wind. And, of course, he was surrounded. Two women lingered close, both dressed for the water in garments that clung sleek to their forms. One wore a wrap of sheer blue silk knotted at her hip, the other a pearly white shift that left her arms and legs bare. Their skin shone sun-warmed, their laughter bubbling as Horian gestured grandly, his voice carrying clear as a bell across the waves. Izzi's brow arched, eyes narrowing. No. I refuse to believe he'll actually succeed. Kaelin folded his arms, amused. "Want me to wager? If I had some coin left?" Izzi leaned against a column, lips curling into a wicked smile. "I want to watch him trip over his own tongue." But Horian didn't falter. With one dazzling grin, he looped an arm around each woman, pulling them snug to his sides as though it were the most natural thing in the world. The women melted into his embrace, their heads tipping toward his shoulders as they strolled up from the sand, toward the very plaza where Izzi and Kaelin stood. Izzi's jaw actually dropped. "You've got to be joking." Kaelin chuckled, shaking his head. "The loud fool makes it work." "Apparently," Izzi muttered, crossing her arms. As the trio mounted the plaza steps, Kaelin cupped a hand to his mouth and bellowed, "Horian!" The man's head snapped up, his grin widening further. If such a thing were possible. "My gods, look at you! You actually came?" He spread his arms wide, nearly jostling his companions. "By the saints, it's been, 3 seasons?" Kaelin snorted. Two? Horian laughed, thumping his chest. "Feels longer. And you?" His eyes narrowed in thought. Don't tell me. Kieran? Callan? No, wait, don't spoil it." Kaelin's smirk flattened into a line. "It's Kaelin." "Kaelin!" Horian roared, pointing as though he'd known it all along. Yes, of course. By the gods, I never forget a face, just the name that comes with it," Izzi muttered under her breath. "Oh, this is going to be fun." Horian eased the two women toward the plaza's edge with a conspiratorial grin. "Darlings, why don't you wait for me at the Azure Lantern? 3rd floor, corner room with the balcony. I'll be along as soon as I settle an old debt with fate." They laughed. One, the girl in the blue silk wrap, flicked his cheek with a fingertip. The other, in the pearly shift, tapped his bare chest as if to make sure it was real. They glided off arm in arm, all sun and perfume and ankle bells. Horian swung back to Kaelin like a storm returning to sea. "You granite-hearted ox, look at you." He grabbed Kaelin by the forearms and tried to shake him. Kaelin didn't budge an inch. "Eating well? Sleeping better? Did the road finally learn it can't kill you?" "Road's smarter than you are," Kaelin rumbled, grinning despite himself. It stopped trying. Horian's eyes snagged on Izzi, the grin sharpened. And who's this bright blade? He swept a bow and on his rise delivered a cheeky slap to Izzi's backside. Steel hissed. Izzi spun on her heel. A dagger's flat kissed Horian's wrist before the cut could draw blood. Her eyes were cool slate. Touch me again and you'll be clapping with stumps. Horian froze, then threw both hands up, laughing, more delighted than chastened. Saints preserve me. Kaelin, where did you find this one? You hoarding treasures now? Keeping her all to yourself? Kaelin barked a laugh. It's not like that. Pity, Horian said, eyes dancing. He turned full wattage on Izzi. Horian Hale, sailor, swordsman, part-time saint, full-time sinner. I offer tours, dances, and occasionally decent advice. Izzi slid the dagger away without looking, unimpressed. Izzi, offers declined. He clutched his heart. Declined, without even hearing the package options? Do any of them start with you apologizing properly? She asked, one brow lifting. Horian's grin softened a hair. He dipped his head. You're right. That was crude. Forgive me? A beat. Izzi weighed him, then gave a small tilt of her chin. Forgiven, once. Once is all a wise man needs, he said brightly, then immediately tried. Dinner? No. Dance? No. A walk by the water so I can say clever things and you can pretend to be annoyed? Izzi's mouth twitched. I don't pretend. Kaelin folded his arms, watching with open amusement. She'll eat you alive, Horian. Then I'd die as I lived, Horian said grandly, admired. Izzi stepped past him, giving his open shirt a skeptical once-over. You missed a button. Strategic, he said. Tragic, she corrected. He laughed again, delighted as ever to be refused with style. All right, business before pleasure. You two look road-chewed. Tell me you've come to Cerulea's rest for better sins than survival? Food, a bed, and a day where nothing tries to stab us, Kaelin said. And maybe a swim, Izzi added, gaze skimming the impossible blue. Horian clapped his hands. Then you've come to the right man and the right island. The Azure Lantern's got rooms that don't itch and a house stew that'll make you weep. Come on, my tab is only moderately cursed. He swept an arm toward the sunlit streets, then glanced sidelong at Izzi, mischief returning. And if you change your mind about that dance? I won't, she said, already walking. You'll know where to find me, he finished, unbothered, falling into step between them as if he'd always belonged there. Horian gave them both a long, theatrical once-over and whistled. Saints and salt, look at you two. Road dust in your hair, sea salt on your boots, blood I don't want to ask about. You'll scare the pretty out of the island if you keep walking around like that. He threw an arm around Kaelin's shoulder it barely reached and beckoned Izzi with the other as if sweeping them into a parade. To the Azure Lantern! Come on, loud steps and louder hearts. Once I get you a room, I'll have the innkeep send up basins, soap, hot water, and fresh clothes. Then we dine like forgiving gods. Tomorrow, he spun on his heel, shouting up to the plaza at large. Tomorrow, I'll give you the grand tour? He didn't so much lead as part the crowd by presence alone. The Azure Lantern rose 3 stories above the sun-bright street, all whitewashed plaster and lapis shutters with a blue glass lantern hanging from a wrought iron bracket over the door. Inside, cool shade breathed across tile floors painted with fish and fern fronds. The lobby smelled of citrus peel and beeswax, and a polished bell sat waiting on the counter like a coin of sunlight. Hesta! Horian boomed at the innkeep, a compact woman with silver-streaked hair and the posture of someone who feared nothing. 2 rooms on the 3rd for my battle-blessed friends, if you please. Send up hot water, soap, and anything in linen that won't itch. Oh, and put it on my tab, won't you, love? Hesta's face lit like someone had opened a window. For Horian Hale? Always. She was already reaching for keys. 3rd floor, seaside, the best breeze. I'll have hot water, soap, and fresh linen sent up at once, and a basket of clothes that won't itch. No talk of tabs today, your friends are our guests. She squeezed Horian's forearm as she slid the keys across to Izzi and Kaelin. Welcome to the Lantern. Anything you need, ask and we'll see it done. See? Horian said, spreading his hands at Izzi as if to present a miracle. I'm loved here. They mounted the stairs, broad and blue-tiled, a mosaic of waves climbing with them. On the 3rd floor, a hallway opened onto bright doors, with painted numbers and a salt-tinged breeze moving through. Horian stopped at 3 in a row and slapped keys into their palms with a flourish. 2 keys. Izzi blinked. You got us 2 rooms? Of course. Horian said, affronted that surprise existed. It's nothing at all. I'm loved by all here. Long story, good story. You'll hear it at dinner. Right now, I have two beauties who require my undivided attention. He tapped his temple, winked, and angled toward the corner room with the little balcony. Scrub the road off, put on something that doesn't smell like a campfire's regrets, and meet me downstairs when you're settled. He was already backing away, walking and talking at once. Stew that'll make you cry, wine that sings, and a view that forgives every sin you brought with you. Tomorrow, don't forget, the grand tour. Tomorrow, Kaelin echoed, dry as driftwood. Horian bowed at the waist, caught a glimpse of himself in the window and approved, then vanished into his room with a laugh that bounced down the corridor. Izzi and Kaelin traded a look, equal parts amusement and disbelief, then slipped their keys into their doors. Inside, each room was a small, cool sanctuary. Lime-washed walls, a bed draped in white linen that smelled faintly of sun and sea, a shuttered window flung open to a wedge of turquoise horizon, a pitcher of sliced citrus water beaded with condensation on the table. A little dish held coarse sea salt soap and a sprig of rosemary. No sooner had Izzi dropped her pack than a knock came and two boys arrived with steaming copper tubs, puffing like bellows, followed by a basket stacked with folded linen, loose shirts, drawstring trousers, soft wraps in sea glass colors. Across the hall, Kaelin rumbled approval at the sight of a mattress that didn't sag and sheets that didn't scratch. Soft, he muttered to no one, testing it with a palm like he might test a new shield. Izzi lifted a sea-green wrap, held it against herself, then set it aside for a pair of pale linen trousers and a sleeveless top that wouldn't catch a dagger hilt. Paradise, she murmured, grinning at her mirror ghost. From his doorway, Kaelin called, if the stew's as good as promised, I might forgive Horian for breathing. If the wine runs like rivers, I might forgive him for talking. Izzi shot back. They shut their doors in mirrored clicks, the sound of road-worn travelers letting walls and hot water and clean cotton do their gentle, necessary work, while downstairs the inn bell chimed twice, and the island went on gleaming like a thing that had never learned the word grief. Steam fogged the small copper tubs as hot water sloshed over their edges, carrying away the grit of the road. For the first time in longer than either cared to admit, Izzi and Kaelin let themselves strip down without the shadow of a blade at their backs. Kaelin's broad frame caught the light from the window, his scars a map of every battle, every ambush survived. A jagged seam trailed across one shoulder, another cut diagonally along his ribs, pale against his skin. He lowered himself into the water with a grunt that was half relief, half disbelief. Hells, he muttered, closing his eyes. I'd forgotten what hot feels like. Across the hall, Izzi let her fingers trail absently to the faint scar at the corner of her lip, the one that showed only when she smiled. The water curled steam around her copper-streaked hair, lifting it like a halo. Her slender ears, tapering to elegant points, flushed pink under the heat, each curve so sensitive she felt every brush of steam as though it were a caress. She scrubbed until her skin prickled and gleamed, until the salt and blood felt like they truly belonged to another life. When she emerged, the basket of fresh clothes was waiting. Kaelin tugged on a light shirt cut loose across his shoulders, the fabric soft, cool, and startlingly clean. Its collar hung open, laced just enough to keep decency while showing the ridges of muscle and scar beneath. Drawstring trousers, sand-colored and comfortable, fell easily into place. He looked, Izzi thought fleetingly, not unlike Horian, only steadier, less polished charm and more unshakable weight. Izzi's own choices were less forgiving. She pulled a short wrap of sea-green fabric around her chest, tied snug behind her neck, leaving her midriff bare, her navel catching the light. The linen trousers rode low on her hips, fitted close enough to flatter but light enough for sea air. She caught herself studying her reflection, sleek, sunlit, far removed from the rogue cloaked in dust and leather. For the briefest breath, it flattered her, but her mouth twisted faintly, violet-gray eyes hardening. She was no wide-eyed tourist, no island beauty meant for lounging by fountains. She tightened the knot and straightened her posture, daring the mirror to argue. From the hallway came a burst of laughter, Horian's unmistakable voice booming, followed by the lighter giggles of his companions. Izzi rolled her eyes, tugging her braid over one shoulder. Persistent fool, she muttered, though there was the ghost of a smile tugging at her mouth. She could admire his sheer audacity, even as he staggered from one conquest to the next. Kaelin stepped out of his room at the same moment, shirt loose across his chest, clean for the first time in months. He arched a brow at her, lips twitching into something caught between amusement and warning. "You look," he rumbled, searching for the word. "Like I'm not impressed," Izzi supplied dryly, slipping past him toward the stairs. "Good," Kaelin said, following, though his eyes flicked once, grudgingly appreciative, before he squared his shoulders. Downstairs, the inn bell rang, and the scent of spiced stew drifted up to meet them. Dinner awaited, and with it, Horian's endless noise. "Gods, he's loud even when he's busy," she muttered. Kaelin huffed through his nose, not quite a laugh. "Well, he's treating us. He can be as loud as he wants." "Fair, fair," she said, her hands up in the air. The common lounge of the Azure Lantern spread wide and welcoming, its vaulted ceiling painted in wave motifs and sea birds. Lanterns of blue glass glowed warmly in the corners, throwing ripples of light across the tiled floor. A handful of travelers sat at small tables, sipping wine or spooning into bowls of spiced stew. A trio of musicians strummed in the corner, their notes bright enough to tangle with the sea breeze drifting through the open shutters. Izzi and Kaelin found a table by the window and sank into its cushions. Minutes stretched, a servant brought them water infused with mint and slices of lemon, but still Horian did not appear. Izzi propped her chin in her palm, playing absently with the tip of her ear. "You know, I thought I was looking forward to an adventure with Horian." She gave a small, rueful smile. "Then I met him." Kaelin let out a low, rolling laugh. "You can have one if you want. I won't fight you for him." Izzi snorted, shaking her head. "No, thank you." Two of those in one party and the gods themselves would pack up and leave. For a moment her eyes drifted, watching the crowd but not seeing it. "Renlin would have loved this place," she said softly. "The sea, the quiet corners, the endless stories in every face. He would have buried himself in it." Kaelin's gaze flicked to her, steady. Then, with a clap of his hand against the table, he snapped her back. "Don't wander too far, Iz. Tell me, what in the hells do you think Horian's done to make himself so beloved here?" Izzi's lips curved into mischief. "I'd say he bedded half the island, but the other half looks just as happy to see him." A voice carried from behind the counter. Not far off, they turned. Hesta, the innkeep, had come closer, a tray balanced easily on her hip. Her eyes softened at their surprise. "I've known that boy since he was no taller than the counter here. An orphan, left with nothing but his noise. But he grew up helping everyone who'd let him. Storms, dry seasons, pirate raids, even monsters from the reefs. Horian was always first to throw himself in and loud enough to drag others with him. He may be brash and a bit off his rocker, but his heart," she shook her head with a fond smile, "his heart is as steady as this island." Izzi glanced at Kaelin, then back to Hesta, lips quirking. My, Hesta chuckled, tapping the tray. "Don't mistake his charm for cheap coin. He's bought his place here 100 times over." Kaelin leaned back, arms folded, his tusked grin subdued but present. "Seems we've fallen in with a local legend, then." Izzi sighed, swirling the mint leaves in her glass. Loud, reckless, impossible, and loved. From above, another burst of laughter thundered through the ceiling. Izzi pressed her fingers to her temple. And still loud. The stairwell boomed with footsteps before Horian himself appeared, shirt looser than before, hair tousled in a way that spoke of hands other than his own. He spread his arms wide the moment he spotted them, grin so bright it seemed to chase the shadows off the walls. My friends, he bellowed. "Forgive my lateness, what can I say? The women upstairs simply would not let me leave." He winked, unapologetic, and dropped into the empty chair at their table like a man claiming his throne. Hesta herself arrived a heartbeat later with trays balanced along her arms. Dishes of spiced olives, bread brushed with oil and herbs, and at the center, steaming bowls of a rich seafood stew whose scent filled the room with warmth and wine. The three of them leaned in as bowls were placed before them. The table suddenly transformed into a banquet fit for gods. "You look much better now," Horian said, raising his mug in a toast. "Fit for the scenery at least. Feast, feast, but don't grow too full. Tomorrow brings swimming and still more food. Tonight," his grin sharpened. "Pick your poison. What do you drink?" "Wine," Izzi answered immediately, leaning back in her chair with an easy smile. "Dark ale," Kaelin said, steady as stone. "Done and done," Horian barked, snapping his fingers for the serving boy. "The lady drinks from the vine, the warrior from the grain." They dug in, and silence fell, broken only by the scrape of spoons and the occasional involuntary sound of delight. The stew was a medley of mussels, shrimp, and tender whitefish, simmered in saffron and wine. kissed with herbs that tasted of sunlight itself. Kalen set his spoon down slowly, staring into his bowl as though it had played a trick on him. "I've never had stew this good." His voice was low, genuine, nearly reverent. Horian leaned back, smacking the table with the flat of his palm. "Hesta, you haven't lost your touch?" From across the room, Hesta raised her own mug in salute, smiling. Izzi lingered over her glass of wine, her violet gray eyes catching the lantern light. She glanced at Horian, laughter dancing just beneath her voice. "Horian? Thank you." Horian leaned forward, elbows braced on the table, grin tilting sly. "Maybe I'll get that dance after all?" Izzi smirked, spoon poised above the stew, her voice dry as salt. "Don't push your luck." She took a slow bite, eyes closing as the flavor melted on her tongue, as if to prove she'd chosen her prize already. Kalen chuckled into his mug. Horian threw his head back and laughed, the sound carrying over the music and chatter, big enough to fill the whole tavern. For once, the night belonged not to shadows or blood, but to food, warmth, and the rare kind of laughter that didn't hurt to hear. The wine kept coming, ruby in glass and sweet on the tongue, and Izzi let every cup slip down as though she could drink the whole sea itself. Her cheeks flushed, violet gray eyes bright with mischief, and a wide grin spread across her lips that never seemed to fade. Across from her, Kalen held his mug with slow, deliberate care, drinking enough to be polite, though he tried to keep the stone wall of his composure. His tusked mouth twitched now and again, betraying amusement. "Horian?" He matched them drink for drink and then some, but the man's eyes never clouded, his voice never slurred. He leaned back in his chair, gesturing grandly with one hand while the other clutched a tankard, and launched into a tale that made the whole corner of the tavern lean closer. And there they were, 5 pirates, all blades and teeth, thinking they could drag Hesta out to the docks and make her talk. "But Horian thumped his chest with his free hand. "I wasn't about to let that stand. I jumped from the balcony of this very inn, landed square on their captain, broke his nose with my elbow. No weapon needed, mind you." "You were drunk," Hesta shouted from the counter, though her smile betrayed the warmth of memory. Drunk, yes. But rum lends courage, my dear." Horian shot back, laughter booming. "Anyway, one by one I knocked them senseless, tied them up with their own rope, and sent them back to sea with a note pinned to the mast. Never touch the lantern again." Izzi let out a hiccup of a laugh, nearly spilling her wine as she leaned forward. "Pinned it? Did you use one of your fancy buttons, Horian? Or, oh gods, maybe?" As she dissolved into laughter, Kalen chuckling low beside her. Horian only grinned wider, basking in the glow of his own legend. "No button, just a dagger that still sits in my belt. Proof, if anyone doubts." The laughter rolled on, the drinks kept flowing, until Izzi's smirk softened into something drowsier. She blinked slow, her head dipping lower with each word, until finally she folded her arms on the table and rested her head atop them. Kalen's eyes cut to her, then to Horian. "Ha! She's done, looks like." Horian raised his mug in salute. "She lasted longer than most who try to match me." Kalen pushed back his chair, steady as ever, and bent to Izzi's side. She groaned in protest, voice muffled by her sleeve. "No, I want to stay." "One more." "You've had enough," Kalen rumbled, coaxing her upright. Izzi's arm hooked lazily around his, her braid slipping forward across her shoulder. As Kalen guided her toward the stairs, she tilted her head back, bleary-eyed, and grinned toward Horian. "Horian, thanks. You're the best." Horian's laughter chased them across the common room, warm and thunderous. "Sleep well, elf. Tomorrow the island is yours?" Kalen shook his head, half smiling as he steered Izzi upstairs. "Gods help us all if it is." Chapter 5. Stupid Games, Stupid Prizes. Izzi woke to sunlight spilling across the tiled floor, bright and merciless. Her back ached. One arm dangled across her bed, the other pressed flat against the floorboards where she had half slid off in the night. A soft groan slipped from her lips as she stirred. Her braid had come half undone, copper-streaked strands sticking every which way like seagrass after a storm. One of her ears bent awkwardly from being pressed against the floor, and when she touched it, she winced and laughed in the same breath. Her clothing was twisted and wrinkled from the rough sleep, yesterday's daring island garb clinging in odd angles. A knock rapped against the door. "Iz," came Kalen's voice, steady as ever. She dragged herself upright, hair falling into her eyes. "Hold a moment," she croaked, then stumbled toward the door. Kaelin stood there, already dressed for the day. He wore loose swimming trousers the color of deep sea, tied with a cord at his waist, and a sleeveless linen tunic open enough to show the lattice of scars across his shoulders. His tusked mouth twitched faintly at her disheveled state. "You look like a storm hit you," he said. "And good morning to you too," Izzi muttered, rubbing her temple with a grin. Kaelin tossed a folded bundle into her arms. "Courtesy of Hesta. Said you'd want this for the water." Izzi closed the door behind her, curiosity stirring as she unfolded the bundle. What spilled into her hands was as bold as ever. A two-piece of soft, cream-colored cloth, cut snug to flatter and tied with delicate cords at the shoulders. Around the hips, a band of sheer silk draped like a sash, translucent enough to shimmer but not conceal, knotted off to one side so it trailed down her thigh like a ribbon of seafoam. She let out a laugh, shaking her head. "Bold as ever, I see." It wasn't armor. It wasn't leather and steel and shadows. It was indulgent, carefree. A thing meant for sun and water, not blood. She slipped into it, braiding her hair back into something vaguely tidy and adjusting the silk so it hung just so. When she opened the door again, Kaelin was waiting in the hall, arms folded, every inch the sentinel even in swim clothes. "Ready for the sea?" he asked. Izzi smirked, hands on her hips as she spun once, silk sash swaying. "Do I look ready?" Kaelin gave a grunt that might have been approval, though his mouth twitched again into the ghost of a smile. Together, they turned toward the stairs, the scent of salt and the crash of waves already drifting in through the open shutters. The hallway of the azure lantern echoed with a familiar thunder. Horian's voice boomed through the stairwell, spilling laughter and greetings to anyone in earshot. Izzi and Kaelin exchanged a look and followed the noise down toward the inn's entrance. Sure enough, he burst through the front doors just as they reached the lobby, his shirt half-buttoned, hair still damp from the sea. "Ah, good, you're awake, friends. I was just on my way back in." Kaelin crossed his arms, deadpan. "It's all right, you're easy to find." Horian threw his head back and laughed, then gave them a long, exaggerated look up and down. "Saints, look at you both. Fresh as the dawn. Izzi, if the sea itself could walk on two legs, it'd look half as radiant as you. And Kaelin, you're dressed like a man finally ready to stop glowering and start living." Kaelin grunted, but there was humor behind it. Izzi smirked, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear, sash swaying at her hip. "Come, come!" Horian beckoned, sweeping them out into the streets with a flourish. He led them through the town square, past the great fountain where dolphins leapt in marble arcs. The plaza was alive already. Vendors hawking fruit, children chasing each other in bursts of laughter, and the air rich with the smell of baking bread. Horian clapped a hand on Kaelin's shoulder, dragging him toward a stall where a woman turned flatbreads on a hot stone and stuffed them with spiced fish and herbs. "Breakfast first," Horian declared. "Paradise demands a full belly." They ate leaning against the fountain, the food hot in their hands, flavors sharp and fresh. Izzi licked her fingers and admitted she hadn't tasted anything like it in years. Kaelin devoured his silently but with clear approval. Then Horian swept them down toward the shoreline. The beach glowed like something out of a dream, white sands soft underfoot, stretching wide and unbroken. The water lapped crystal clear, so pure it revealed every pebble and darting fish beneath. Sunlight painted the waves in silver and turquoise, gulls wheeling above with their cries sharp against the sky. Izzi wandered ahead of them, her toes sinking into the wet sand until the surf kissed her ankles. A delighted laugh escaped her lips as schools of tiny fish swirled around her feet. She walked farther, the water climbing her calves, her waist, until she eased herself down and let it flow over her body. Cool waves slid across her skin, lifting her braid, soaking the silk sash until it streamed like sea foam. Soon, only her face broke the surface, her eyes half shut as she basked in the weightless embrace. On the shore, Kaelin settled onto the sand, his feet in the water, watching with the calm of a man finally letting the world soften around him. Horian flopped down beside him with all the grace of a wave breaking, stretching his arms behind his head. "See?" Horian said, voice as wide as the sea. "Paradise. Even you can't scowl through this, Kaelin." Kaelin gave a low grunt that might have been a laugh, the salt wind tugging his short hair. "You may just be right." Izzi floated just beyond, her laughter carried back to them on the waves, and for the first time in a long while, the world felt like it wasn't trying to kill them. Izzi let the tide lap and pull around her, the coolness sliding silk smooth across her skin. She leaned back until the water hugged her shoulders, her braid floating loose like copper seaweed. Fish wove in darting patterns about her legs, silver, quick, scales glinting with sun. One brushed against her ankle and she laughed softly, tilting her head to let the surf wash over one pointed ear. Sensitive as always, it sent a shiver through her. She closed her eyes, letting the rhythm of the sea work its spell, each wave folding against her like it was trying to carry her farther from the weight of the past weeks. A shadow fell beside her. Kalen lowered himself into the surf with a grunt, the water barely climbing his scarred torso as he stretched his long legs out beside her. She looked so small next to him, her form nearly submerged while he sat half out of the water, his bulk breaking the waves instead of letting them break over him. For a moment, they sat in silence, the contrast between them softened by the sea. Izzi floating weightless, Kalen rooted like stone. Finally, she cracked one eye open and murmured, "Where's our guide off to?" Kalen's mouth twitched. "Went off to check something, though before he left he tossed me an idea." He glanced at her, the sunlight tracing every line of scar across his chest. "Work is coin. Said we might want it before we set our eyes back on Thalen." Izzi tilted her head, ears twitching at the way the water whispered against them. "Work, huh? What sort?" "Beast trouble inland," Kalen said. His tone was matter-of-fact, but his eyes softened on her as he added, "Horian was going to gather mercenaries, but he reckons we'll do. Said if you're half as good as I was in Velimir, the three of us won't have any trouble." Izzi smirked, water dripping from her lips as she sat up, violet-gray eyes gleaming. "Half as good as you? I'll have to make it twice just to balance the scales then." Kalen rumbled a low laugh, shaking his head. "That's what I told him." Izzi let herself sink back again, the waves rolling against her chin, fish darting like bright little sparks around her. "Beast hunting in paradise," she murmured, voice dreamy but edged with humor. "Guess we won't have too much time to grow soft." Kalen leaned back on his arms, squinting into the blazing blue. "Not our way." And for a little while longer, they let the tide speak for them, the water flowing over scars and laughter alike. The waves carried Izzi's thoughts out with them, the sea stroking her ears and the fish weaving lazy circles around her legs. Kalen sat solid at her side, a wall of scarred muscle half in, half out of the water, content to let her drift. The peace was broken, inevitably, by Horian's voice booming over the crash of the surf. "There you are! Saints, you two vanished like guilty lovers." Izzi sat up, water streaming off her hair, and Kalen only sighed through his nose as their guide strode across the sand with 3 mugs clutched in his hands. He was grinning like the sun itself, linen shirt flapping open as though buttons had never been invented. He dropped into the sand before them with practiced ease and set the drinks down. A frothing mug of ale pushed toward Kalen, a glass of wine toward Izzi, and a heavy pour of rum he kept for himself. "Ale for the stone wall," Horian declared. "Wine for the Lady of Light. Rum for the scoundrel." Izzi accepted hers, twisting the stem between her fingers. "And what of this beast problem you mentioned?" Horian waved her concern away, rum already halfway to his lips. "Not to worry, that's a tale for another day. We'll be leaving with a caravan in a few days' time, heading inland, and then we'll talk beasts and blades. For now..." He lifted his mug high, splashing rum onto his bare chest and not caring in the least. "Bask while we can. Drink, eat, swim. Let the sea rinse the road from your bones. Tomorrow will be louder, dirtier, and full of teeth. But today..." Kalen clinked his ale against the rim of Horian's mug, a rare grin tugging at his mouth. "Today's enough." Izzi raised her glass last, smirking faintly as her violet-gray eyes lingered on the horizon. "For now," she echoed. The 3 of them drank together, the sun burning overhead, the water gleaming like crystal at their feet, and, for the first time in too long, no shadow lingered at their backs. Izzi leaned back into the water, the tide lapping at her chin, violet-gray eyes half shut in contentment. Gods, this feels good. If I wasn't such a great swimmer, I'd have drowned myself in bliss already." Horian, who had been tearing at a piece of fruit with his teeth, perked up instantly. His grin widened like a shark's. "A great swimmer, are you?" Izzi cracked an eye open at him, smirking. "Better than you, loudmouth, that much I'm sure of." Kalen gave a low chuckle. "Here we go." Horian tossed the fruit pit into the sand and spread his arms, booming loud enough for gulls to scatter. "Then prove it. The buoy, out there." He jabbed a finger toward the bobbing marker in the glimmering blue. "First one there and back. Winner claims a prize. Izzi sat up, water sluicing off her shoulders. And what are you putting up as a prize? Horian's eyes gleamed. If I win, you owe me one night. A romantic evening, moonlight, wine, the works. I'll woo you until you swoon. Kalen muttered into his mug. You'll drown her before that happens. Izzi ignored him, tilting her head as if weighing the words, fingers trailing along the water. Fine. But if I win, you owe me a favor. No questions, no wriggling, no clever tongue. When I call it in, you do it. That stilled Horian's grin for half a heartbeat, long enough for Izzi to know she'd hit him with something he hadn't expected. Then he laughed, rich and full, and slapped his thigh. Dangerous, elf, but I like it. Agreed. Kalen groaned, setting his ale aside. Saints save me. One of you's going to regret this, and I'll be the one hauling your bodies out of the surf. Horian tore his shirt over his head and flung it down in the sand with a flourish. Come then. Let's see if your stroke matches your tongue. Izzi smirked, tightening the silk knot at her hip. Try not to choke on my wake, Hale. Kalen pushed himself upright from where he sat in the surf, brushing the sand from his palms. His tusked grin was small but unmistakable. Fine. If you're both going to act like children, I'll be the judge. Horian slapped him on the back, nearly toppling him forward. That's the spirit, Kale. A fair arbiter, though he's bound to favor me, of course. Izzi's violet gray eyes flashed as she stood, water curling around her waist. Favor you? Please. He's already seen me outrun you, now he'll see me outswim you. Kalen raised a hand, voice low and calm against their sparks. Simple rules. To the buoy and back. First hand to slap this very rock wins. He planted his palm on a stone jutting from the shallows. Horian stripped his shirt and flung it aside, muscles cut and bronzed by the sun. Izzi tightened the silk sash at her hip, her braid dripping down her back. They crouched in the shallows like predators, eyes fixed on the bobbing marker out in the glimmering blue. Ready? Kalen said. The waves hushed for half a heartbeat. Go. They tore forward, water exploding in white spray. Horian's strokes were wide and powerful, cutting through the surf with sheer force. Izzi moved sleek and sharp, her body sliding through the water like a fish, strokes quick and precise. For a while, she pulled ahead, her smaller form darting between the waves with speed. But Horian was relentless. By the time they hit the buoy, his reach brought him alongside her, both of them slapping it in the same instant. They pivoted, breathless laughter spilling from Izzi's lips, determination blazing in Horian's grin. The swim back was chaos. Splashing, stealing glances, trading jabs mid-breath. Slower than a gull, Hale? Izzi gasped, her laughter bubbling with the surf. You call that swimming? Fast enough to catch you, sea sprite? Horian barked, spitting salt water. The shoreline loomed, Kalen standing sentinel with arms crossed. They lunged the last stretch, surf churning around them. Izzi's hand slapped the rock a breath after Horian's. Kalen's voice carried over the waves, flat but final. Horian. Izzi flopped backward into the shallows, laughing despite herself, chest heaving as water streamed down her skin. Saints, damn it, too close. Horian roared with triumph, pounding the water with his fist. Victory! The sea herself bends to my charm. He leaned down, dripping, to grin at Izzi. A night elf, wine, moonlight, and me. Don't think you can wriggle free. Izzi smirked, pushing wet hair from her face. Don't push your luck, loudmouth. I pay my debts. Kalen shook his head, muttering, Looks like you're getting the Horian adventure you always wanted. Shut up, Izzi said with a smirk. Horian slapped the seawater from his chest, still grinning like a madman. He slicked his dark hair back with both hands, then stood, triumphant, as though he had conquered the entire ocean rather than simply touched a buoy first. Well then, he boomed, voice carrying down the beach and startling gulls into flight. A race, a victory, and a promise. I'll be by your room at sunset, Izzi. Be ready. The night awaits us? He didn't wait for her answer, striding off toward the boardwalk with his shirt half draped across his shoulder, already chatting up two passing women as though he'd known them his whole life. Kalen's laughter rumbled low in his chest, rare and genuine. He shook his head, water dripping from his jaw. You've stepped in it now. Izzi dragged her fingers back through her wet braid, violet gray eyes following Horian until he disappeared into the bustle of Cerulea's rest. She sighed. I guess our tour is cut short then. Seems so. Kalen settled back in the surf, still amused. They lingered on the beach as the sun began its long descent, the sky painted in streaks of gold and crimson. The water turned copper, fish flashing silver beneath the surface until the tide blurred into shadow. When at last the gulls quieted and lanterns flickered to life along the shoreline, they stood and made their way back toward the azure lantern. At the inn's third floor, Izzi slipped toward her door. Kalen leaned against his own with arms crossed, a crooked grin tugging his lips. "Good luck, Iz." Izzi shot him a look equal parts defiance and dread. "Thanks for nothing." She pushed into her room and closed the door behind her. The room was dim, the shutters thrown open to the sea breeze. On her bed lay a folded parcel of fabric, a note perched atop in bold, looping script. "For the most radiant star in tonight's sky." She squinted at it, already half regretting everything, then unfolded the fabric. Silk spilled across her hands in daring swaths of deep indigo trimmed with silver thread. The top bared her midriff entirely, cut low across the shoulders so her collarbones would gleam in the lantern light. The skirt was slit high along both thighs, layered in gauzy silk that promised more suggestion than concealment. A belt of soft silver cords was meant to tie at the hip, with delicate tassels that would sway as she walked. Izzi held it up, sighing through her nose. "Bold as ever, Horian." For a long moment she considered tossing it back on the bed and answering the door in her leathers out of sheer spite. But then, with another sigh, she tugged the garments into place. The silk was cool against her skin, the fabric whispering with every movement. Her reflection in the small mirror made her ears flush pink, though her smile turned sly as she adjusted the sash. "Well," she murmured, brushing her fingers over the faint scar at her lip. "Let's see if the loudmouth can keep his mouth shut long enough to notice." She sat on the edge of the bed, hair still damp from the sea, waiting for the inevitable thunder of Horian hail at her door. "Izzi!" The call boomed down the corridor like a drumbeat, familiar enough to make Izzi half smile, half wince. She rose from the bed, silk skirts slipping against her thighs, and reached the latch just as Horian's silhouette cut the lantern glow. He stood framed in warm light, not the usual hurricane but something shaped and gleaming. Indigo silks, a crimson sash knotted carelessly at his hip, a bronze cuff at his wrist that caught the glow. In one hand, a bundle of flowers, moon-pale frangipani, sprays of night-blooming jasmine, and a single bright hibiscus like a splash of sunset. Lanterns had been strung the length of the hall, their gold halos overlapping to form a gentle path toward the stairs and the door beyond. And then, like a wave folding into itself, his voice softened. "You look stunning," he said, and the grin Izzi knew so well uncurled into something quieter, warmer. He offered his hand without flourish. The part of her that braced for spectacle blinked, thrown. Her fingers found his. His palm was warm and steady. "Come," he murmured. "There's a night waiting." They followed the lanterns down into the city as though walking a constellation laid on stone. The sea breeze moved through open shutters. Distant laughter flared and fell. Vendors tipped their chins at Horian. Children called his name, and he answered them with small gestures and smaller words, never letting his attention drift from the elf at his side. Izzi watched him from the corner of her eye, the brightness still there, but banked, like a hearth tended low. The sash at her waist breathed with each step, her ears pricked to every sound, the silk at her shoulder whispering against skin. "What?" she said at last. "No audience tonight? Not everything I do is for a crowd," he answered, a sliver of smile, eyes crinkling. It wasn't a line, it landed and stayed. Lanterns led them off the promenade and onto the sand. The surprise waited where the tide unrolled its silver. Driftwood poles stood like sentinels, garlanded with more lanterns. Their reflections trembled on the skin of the water. Cushions and woven blankets formed a nest on the beach. A low table held plates set like offerings, grilled sea bream licked by herbs and oil, a salad of orange and fennel, figs ripened to jam sweetness, pomegranate seeds shining like rubies. A decanter of pale island wine sat in an ice bowl glazed with salt. The air smelled of jasmine, citrus, and the good part of smoke. Farther down the shore, a lone fiddler sat on an overturned skiff, bowing slow notes that braided with the hush hiss of the surf. Izzi stood very still and let the picture soak in. "You did this?" He gave a half shrug, though his grin was quieter now. "Paradise should be shared properly. Please sit." They ate without rush. Izzi took a bite of bream, the skin crackled, the flesh fell away clean and tender. Oil and lemon, a snap of sea. The wine cooled the back of her tongue, bright and floral. She watched Horian pour, watched the way he didn't fill silence to the brim but let it breathe between them like another tide. "That storm you bragged about," she said finally, turning the stem of her cup. The near drowning and saving Hesta from pirates. That true? True, he said, not booming, not boasting, just opening a door. Just a memory. I was 14 when the storm took our boat. I swallowed more salt than breath. Should have died, but somehow I crawled back, half drowned, half broken. Hesta was the one who found me, dragged me to warmth. Years later, when pirates came to take her, I didn't think. I just couldn't let them. She was the only person who had ever saved me. I owed her everything. He didn't make himself grand in the telling. He left room in it for fear and for gratitude. It startled something soft in Izzi she didn't let out often. He sipped, then tipped his head, inviting and careful. And you, Izzi? What storms have you survived? Her mouth opened on habit. The words snagged. Banishment like a slammed gate. Celine's green eyes. Fingers on her arm counting coin. The scar at her lip pulled tighter. Horian saw the falter. He eased backward a fraction, palms open on his knees the way men do when approaching a frightened animal. Not pitying, not prying. It's all right, he said. You owe me nothing you don't want to give. Air moved again. She let out a breath that shook more than she liked and found a crooked smile. You're not what I expected. Good, he said simply, and for the first time she believed that word was for her, not for whatever show he usually played. The fiddler's tune deepened, low strings like a second heartbeat. Horian rose and offered his hand again. That dance you keep denying me, one song, nothing that hurts. Heat climbed the rims of her ears. I don't dance. I never really have. Pretend we're fighting, he murmured, close enough she could smell salt and soap on his skin. You've always been good at that, right? Follow my lead. She laughed despite herself, quick, breathy, and set her palm in his. The callus along his thumb brushed the one on hers, a small shock of recognition. They stepped onto the wet line where the sea licked the shore, and the world narrowed to the slow sweep of his arm, the give of sand beneath bare feet, the weight and counterweight of two bodies finding a rhythm that wasn't quite battle and wasn't quite surrender. He didn't spin her. He didn't perform. He guided, pressure here, space there, listening with his hands. The waves gathered around their ankles, cooled warm skin, slid away. The lanterns swayed. The fiddler found a melody that felt like something remembered rather than learned. Izzi let her chin tip closer to his shoulder than prudence advised. The scar at her lip softened, almost a smile. Her ears, so quick to catch the world's harshness, colored under the brush of wind and the hush of strings. See, he said, barely above the surf. All a fight is, slowed down, breath and timing. You're insufferable, she murmured, which, on her tongue, passed for praise. Occupational hazard. His grin flickered there, less blaze, more ember. And when she shifted, he shifted, and it felt possible for a heartbeat that the world could be this easy. The song faded like the tide putting itself to bed. They stood with it a breath longer than necessary, then stepped apart in a small, almost reluctant sway. Well, Izzi pushed hair from her cheek, aiming for droll and hitting it only halfway. You didn't crush my toes. Congratulations, I'll add it to my legends, he said, and there it was again, that softened grin, the one that belonged to no audience. They walked back along the lantern path with the surf at their backs and the town's gentle clamor ahead. Izzi's sandals whispered on stone. His hand hovered near her elbow without quite touching, a courtesy that felt louder than any flourish. People greeted him. He lifted 2 fingers and kept walking. At her door, he stopped. The flowers had wilted a little with the salt air. He looked at them, then at her, as if weighing a dozen ridiculous lines and choosing none. He bowed instead, small and real. A favor owed, he said lightly, then gentler. Good night, Izzi. Good night, Horian, she answered, surprising herself with how soft it came out. She slipped inside and leaned back against the wood, the cool panel steady against her spine. Lantern light from the window painted her bare midriff in pale gold. The tassel at her hip ticked time in the breeze. Her ears were still warm. She touched the scar at her lip and found it less tight. What in the hells, she whispered to the quiet room, have I gotten into? The knock came soft, almost tentative. Izzi lifted her head from where she sat perched at the edge of the bed, still dressed in Horian's silks, the lantern light painting her bare shoulders gold. Her heart lurched when his voice came through the door, quiet for once. Izzi, I've got a bottle and 2 glasses. Thought we could share one more before sleep. Her pulse hammered at her temples. Foolish, she thought, foolish to let him any closer. But her legs carried her to the door anyway, and when she opened it, there he was. Bottle tucked under one arm, glasses in the other, his grin smaller than usual, softened by nerves. "May I?" he asked. She stepped aside and he entered. They sat together at the head of the bed, side by side, their knees almost touching. He poured carefully, the wine pale and cool, and handed her a glass. She lifted it to her lips, but after a few sips her thoughts tangled, her tongue heavier with the weight of them. "Celine," Izzi whispered at last, staring into the dark red pool in her glass. "I once yearned for her, wanted her." Her chest rose and fell in a tremor. "She saw me, shaped me, and twisted me into something else. She made me what I am, and still, she follows me. Everywhere I go, it's her shadow, her voice." Her fingers tightened on the stem. "And the worst part? Even now, even knowing everything, I feel drawn to her, like a tether I can't cut. I don't understand myself." Her words broke into the hush of the room. The sea whispered through the shutters. She didn't dare look at him, half expecting a laugh, a careless quip. But there was nothing, just his silence, heavy and steady. She set her glass down with shaking hands. He mirrored her, placing his aside as well. Without asking, he shifted closer, sitting at the edge of the bed now, then leaning back until his arms slid gently around her. He drew her against him, not demanding, not tight, just an anchor. Izzi let her head rest beneath his chin, hair spilling against his chest. The warmth of his hold steadied her breathing, the steady drum of his heartbeat drowning out the echoes of Celine's name in her skull. "You don't need to understand yourself tonight," Horian murmured, voice low and careful. "Not with me." Her throat closed around an answer. She let her eyes fall shut, the taste of wine lingering, the scent of him, salt, spice, and warmth filling her lungs. The two of them stayed that way, neither speaking further. The glasses stood forgotten on the table, the bottle half full. The sea sang, the lantern burned low, and eventually, exhaustion wrapped them both. She slept first, cradled in his arms, and when sleep claimed him too, he simply held her tighter, as if daring her ghosts to try and take her away. Izzi woke to an empty bed. The lantern had burned itself to smoke, the shutters still open to a sea whispering pale in dawnlight. Her head ached faintly, her body still wrapped in the silks Horian had chosen for her the night before. She lifted her hand, fingertips brushing her bare midriff, and memory struck sharp, his arms around her, the words she had let fall, the way she had spoken Celine's name like a wound reopened. "Why did I tell him that?" she whispered, her voice ragged. With a groan, she dragged the sheets over her head, burying herself in their cool linen folds as if they could hide her from herself. A knock rattled the door. She froze, then pushed herself upright, silk skirts twisting around her legs. She pulled the latch. Kalen stood there, broad and steady as always. His tusked grin tugged, eyes flicking once over her state, silks crumpled, hair wild, ears pinked at the tips. He scratched his jaw. "Came to check on ya. These outfits they're, She waved him off, exasperated. Yeah, I know." Before Kalen could reply, Horian's voice boomed from the corner of the hall. "Izzi!" He rounded the corner like a storm at sea, holding a tray high above his head. On it sat plates of fruit, spiced bread, and steaming bowls of porridge perfumed with cinnamon. "I made you breakfast for a goddess." He stopped short at the sight of Kalen. "Ah, Kalen! Will you be joining us? There's enough to make even you smile." Kalen rolled his eyes, but Izzi, still half flustered, looked from one man to the other. Her gaze lingered on Horian, his grin broad, his energy loud as ever, but beneath it, she thought she saw the echo of the quiet man from the night before. She found herself nodding. "Yeah, of course he'll join us." And in that small, unexpected moment, Izzi wondered if Horian Hale might not be the fool she had first believed, but something far more complicated. Chapter 6. Departures. The days in Cerulea's rest unfurled like silk banners in the wind. Sunlight spilled across white sand each morning, the horizon gleaming so blue it blurred into dream. The air always smelled of salt and citrus, mingling with the perfume of flowers that clung to the balconies and fountains. Everywhere was laughter, children darting through plazas with bright shells in hand, vendors crying out their wares, sweetbreads dripping with honey, fish pulled still twitching from the sea, wine poured as though the island feared running dry. For the first time and longer than she could remember, Izzi's shoulders loosened. She let herself swim in the crystal shallows until schools of tiny fish wove around her like ribbons of silver. She walked the plazas at Kalen's side, trading half-hearted barbs while he sampled every meat skewer and flatbread offered to him. And every evening, Horian dragged them somewhere new. A tavern with music that shook the rafters, a cliffside trail where lanterns glittered like a second sky, or some hidden cove he swore only he knew about. At first, Izzi rolled her eyes, certain she'd tire of his antics. But more than once she caught herself smiling when she thought no one looked, her ears twitching pink at the sound of his booming laugh. Kalen noticed, of course, though he said nothing, just hid his amusement behind the rim of his cup. Still, she knew it couldn't last. On the morning of their departure, the spell began to break. The gates of Cerulea's Rest bustled with noise not of leisure but of business. A caravan of traders assembled, wagons creaking under bolts of silk, crates of dried fish, jars of oil sealed with wax. Oxen pawed at the dirt, snorting steam into the cool dawn. Guards adjusted their armor, eyes already scanning the road north. Izzi pulled on her own washed leathers, familiar weight settling over her shoulders like an old truth. Her twin daggers slipped back into their sheaths at her hips, steel glinting faintly in the sunrise. The silks of last night, soft and shimmering, felt like some other woman's memory. Beside her, Kalen tugged at the strap of his greatsword, the massive blade resting easy across his back. His washed tunic and cloak smelled faintly of rosemary soap, but the scars along his arms reminded anyone watching what kind of man walked among them. Horian, of course, looked as though he had been born to straddle the line between adventurer and peacock. He wore bright linen, open at the chest, a sash wound carelessly around his hips. His hair shone in the sunlight, his grin already flashing as he helped traders load crates and flirted with every second passerby. Yet when his eyes found Izzi, they softened briefly, as if he too felt the weight of leaving paradise behind. The three of them stood at the edge of the crowd, the last of the salt wind brushing their faces. Izzi glanced back once, the fountain, the whitewashed walls, the lanterns still strung across the streets, and exhaled. "Back to the road," she murmured. Kalen grunted his agreement. Horian clapped them both on the shoulders, loud enough to draw stares. Back to the world. And straight into its mouth, no doubt. But for now, forward. The caravan creaked into motion, wheels crunching over the packed dirt road, banners of bright cloth fluttering in the breeze. Izzi fell into step between Kalen and Horian, the laughter of Cerulea's Rest already fading behind her. Ahead loomed the shadowed spine of mountains, sharp against the sky, waiting. The caravan wound its way north like a rattling serpent, wagons groaning under crates, wheels crunching over dirt that slowly gave way to stone. The sea breeze thinned as the hours stretched, replaced by the cool bite of inland wind, the scent of pine drifting down from the distant peaks. In the last wagon, nestled among sacks of grain and bolts of cloth, Izzi slept with her head tipped lightly against Kalen's shoulder. Her braid had loosened in the jostling, strands of copper-streaked hair spilling across her cheek. Every so often the wagon hit a rut, and her scarred lip twitched with a half-muttered word, but Kalen stilled himself, letting her weight rest easy on him. Horian lounged opposite, long legs stretched carelessly across the planks, hands laced behind his head. For once his voice wasn't carrying above the caravan. It was quiet, waiting, the only sound the groan of wood and the creak of the oxen's harness. Kalen broke the silence first, voice low so as not to wake her. "What kind of trouble are we walking into?" Horian's eyes opened, green flecked with gold, and for a heartbeat the grin was absent. The villagers said people vanish on the mountain trail, gone without a trace. Hunters, travelers, even a few caravans like this one. He shifted upright, resting his elbows on his knees. No one's body ever found, just the screams, cut off sharp. Then nothing but feathers. Kalen's brow furrowed. "Feathers. Rumor is," Horian said, his tone carrying that dangerous weight of possibility. "A griffin haunts the cliffs, comes down in the night, carries folk off like sheep in a wolf's teeth." The wagon jolted over a stone. Izzi stirred, her head shifting on Kalen's shoulder but didn't wake. Kalen's hand flexed against his knee. "And you believe it?" Horian tilted his head, eyes narrowing toward the jagged skyline rising in the distance. The peaks were black against the paling sky, sharp as a crown of knives. "I've heard stranger truths." For a while neither spoke. The oxen trudged on, the mountains looming closer with each turn of the wheels. The wagon creaked to a slower rhythm as the road leveled. Smoke curled against the twilight sky, faint pinpricks of lantern light flickering through the trees ahead. The scent of pine gave way to hearthfire and cooking stew, the sound of dogs barking faintly over the rumble of wheels. Kaelin shifted, glancing at Izzi still dozing on his shoulder. With a gentleness that sat strangely against the scars on his arms, he gave her a small nudge. We're here." Her lashes fluttered, violet-gray eyes catching the glow of the last sun. She yawned wide, stretching her arms over her head before rubbing the heel of her palm against her lip scar. "Saints, how long was I out?" Horian's voice boomed from across the wagon, his grin bright enough to chase shadows, long enough to miss me singing half the journey. "Glad to have you back with us, Izzi." She rolled her eyes, but a smile tugged despite herself. They climbed down from the wagon into the cool breath of evening. The town huddled in the cradle of the mountain's roots, cobbled streets winding between steep-roofed houses, their shutters drawn tight. Though lanterns lit the square, the mood was subdued. The people moved with hushed voices, eyes often darting toward the peaks rising black and jagged above them. At the head of the caravan, a man waited. Broad-shouldered, though age had bent him some, hair silvering at the temples, a heavy mantle of fur drawn around his shoulders. His eyes lit when he spotted Horian striding forward. "Hail!" the man rumbled, pulling him into a rough embrace. "By the gods, Chief Orvin!" Horian barked, gripping him back. "I thought this place would have eaten you alive by now!" Orvin chuckled low, though the sound held weariness. He pulled back, his gaze shifting to Izzi and Kaelin. "You've brought company." "My best," Horian said, almost solemn now. "They'll serve you well." Orvin's smile thinned. "It's not just service I need, Horian. It's vengeance." His voice dropped, the lantern light catching the deep lines around his eyes. "My son. He was taken 3 nights past. No body, no sign, only feathers in the trail. They say it was the griffin. They all say it." Silence pressed close for a moment. Even Horian's grin faltered. Orvin exhaled, steadying himself, then clapped Horian's arm once more. "The inn will see to you. Tell the keeper your stay is covered. Old debts still mean something here." Horian nodded, clasping his hand firm. "We'll find what hunts you, Orvin. You have my word." The chief gave a tired smile, then turned back toward the longhouse at the far end of the square, shoulders bowed by more than years. Izzi's hand drifted unconsciously to the hilt of one dagger, her ears twitching at the hush of the villagers nearby. Kaelin's face was carved stone, unreadable. "Come," Horian said, his voice dropping low. "Let's see our beds. Tomorrow we begin." The square was quieter than Izzi liked, lanterns burning low as if even flame feared to draw too much attention. The people gave them sidelong glances as they passed, quick and measuring, before ducking back into doorways. Kaelin fell in at Horian's side, his voice low but steady. "You said there'd be coin. Chief didn't mention a thing." Horian smirked, digging into the folds of his sash. "Oh, he wouldn't. Pride, grief, it tangles a man's tongue. But don't worry, Kael." He produced a slip of parchment and slapped it into the warrior's hand. "He's good for it." Kaelin unfolded it, eyes scanning the ink. His brows lifted, the mask of his face cracking. "Is." He passed it over. Izzi's violet-gray eyes widened as she read. The bounty written there was more than either of them had seen promised in years, enough to buy freedom from the road for months, maybe longer. "By the saints," she whispered. Her fingers brushed the parchment as though afraid it might vanish. "All this, for one beast?" Horian grinned, wide and bright, but his eyes were serious in the lantern light. "People pay dearly when fear eats their homes, and if it's a griffin, they'll pay even more to see its wings broken." He flicked the parchment back from Izzi's hand with a flourish, tucking it into his sash once again. "Trust me, this one's worth our time." Kaelin's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Izzi glanced once more toward the looming black silhouette of the mountains, unease prickling at her skin. The inn's lanterns glowed just ahead, promising warmth, food, and perhaps answers. The inn loomed at the far end of the square, its lanterns a little brighter than the rest of the town, as if it was doing its best to fight off the shadow of the mountains. The sign above the door, carved in wood bleached pale by years of sun and frost, creaked faintly in the wind. Inside, the air was warmer, heavier with smoke and spiced stew. Voices murmured low around tables. Men and women bent close over mugs. Even laughter, where it came, was muted, strained, as though the mountain's shadow had crept in here too. Horian clapped Kaelin on the back with a booming laugh. "Come on, Stoneface, let's find us rooms before you grow moss." He turned his grin on Izzi. "Get us something to drink, will you?" "I'll see what I can do," she said, stepping aside. "Rum." Horian barked after her, drawing a few startled looks from the quiet patrons. "The darker the better." Izzi rolled her eyes but didn't slow her stride. She slipped toward the bar, weaving between tables, the air thick with the mingling scents of sweat, leather, and roasted meat. And that was when she saw him. He leaned against the bar with the ease of someone who knew how to command a room without trying. A half-elf, tall and built broad across the shoulders, lean muscle visible even beneath the black shirt he wore open at the throat. His hair was dark, catching the lantern light in faint streaks of bronze, tied loosely at the nape. His eyes, striking green, sharp as glass, lifted from his cup just as hers caught him, pinning her in place. His wrists and fingers gleamed with rings and bangles of varying metals, each one etched with marks she didn't recognize. Bandages wound his left arm from the base of his fingers all the way up beneath the sleeve, stark white against his skin. His left still, just visible in the lamplight, dark runes curled across his bandage, inked deep as though they had grown there rather than been written. They pulsed faintly, alive in a way that made her skin prickle. And then, peculiar, impossible, her eyes snagged on the cuff at his ear. Silver, the exact same design as her own. Her stomach flipped. Twin broadswords rested against the bar beside him, their hilts worn smooth, their edges cared for with near reverence. He stood close enough to touch them with ease, though he didn't need to. His presence alone was weapon enough. Izzi realized she had stopped mid-step, staring too long. Her pulse tripped hard. She tore her gaze away, but it was too late. The half-elf's eyes were already on her. Steady, unblinking, unreadable. "Can I help you, elf?" The words weren't curious. They were blunt, flat, as if he were already bored with the answer. His green eyes didn't waver, and though his tone was quiet, it carried the weight of someone entirely unamused at being observed. Izzi straightened, smoothing her sash with one hand, letting her most disarming smirk tug at her scarred lip. "Maybe I just thought you looked like you could use the company. Sitting here all brooding, glaring at your drink. Not a good look, you know." He tilted his head slightly, as though assessing a puzzle. "Then perhaps don't look." The dismissal was clean, without heat. He turned back to his glass. Izzi slid onto the stool beside him anyway, propping her chin on her hand, violet gray eyes glinting with mischief. "You know, most men at least try to pretend when a woman stares too long." The half-elf didn't look at her. "I'm not most men," she smirked, tilting her head. "You are a joy." That earned her nothing but the faintest flicker of an eyelid. She tried again, letting her gaze drop deliberately to the bandages wrapping his arm. "So, fashion statement? Or did you lose to someone better?" He set his glass down, voice level, cool. "Neither." Izzi laughed softly, though it caught a little at the edge. "And that means?" Finally meeting her eyes, his green stare was unblinking, steady. It's supposed to end the question. For the first time, her smile wavered. She covered it with another drink, then leaned closer, ears twitching faintly pink. "All right then, not the bandages. Maybe you'll tell me why you're here. Don't say it's for meeting new people." Something sharp lit in his gaze then, though his voice stayed calm. "Does it matter? Maybe," Izzi said, tilting her glass. "Because you're not the only one after the beast." That landed. His lips curved, not into a smile, but into something colder, patronizing. He turned slightly toward her, his gaze raking her like a blade. "Oh, you are?" His tone was soft, condescending. "You with your little daggers and your clever tongue? You think you'll walk into the mountains and come back with its head?" Her ears burned hot, but she forced a smirk, refusing to flinch. "Don't need to bring back its head, just need to put it down." He studied her for a long beat, the silence between them drawn taut as a bowstring. Then he leaned back, the faint glow of the runes on his left arm catching the lantern light. Whatever edge had surfaced slipped back behind the wall. "Then watch yourself," he said, standing with smooth precision. He slid both broadswords into place across his back. These things will eat anyone who doesn't know what they're doing. Without another glance, he left the bar, the door closing behind him with a muted thud. Izzi stared at the empty space he'd occupied, smirk faded, her pulse quick and uneven. Saints, he had gotten under her skin. The door thudded shut behind him, leaving Izzi at the bar with her jaw tight and her ears flushed hot. She downed the rest of her wine in one swallow, setting the cup down with a little more force than she meant to. A shadow loomed at her side. Kaylin's voice, calm as ever, broke through. "Who was that?" Izzi let out a sharp exhale through her nose, smirk curling bitter. Competition, it would seem. Kaylin raised a brow but didn't press. He simply tipped his head toward the stairs. Together they made their way up the narrow wooden steps, boots thumping against boards worn thin by years of weary travelers. The room they found Horian in was not nearly as grand as Cerulea's rest. A single bed sat against the far wall, the sheets clean but plain, the window shuttered tight against the night air. A table with one chair stood in the corner, no more, no less. Horian was sprawled across the bed as though he owned it, boots tossed onto the floor, hands laced behind his head. He looked up as they entered, grin flashing. "Ah, there you are. Was beginning to think you'd both been swallowed whole." Kaylin leaned against the table, arms crossed. "Another hunter's here, after the griffin." That drew Horian upright, his grin broadening instead of dimming. "Of course there is. A beast like that, half the damned countryside will be sniffing for its feathers." He swung his legs over the side of the bed, leaning forward. "But here's the truth. Most of them are amateurs. Drunk mercs, green blades, or fools with more coin than sense. They'll blunder into the mountains, and the mountains will take them." Izzi folded her arms, still prickling from the half-elf's words. "And if he isn't an amateur?" Horian's brow arched, catching the heat in her tone, but he only chuckled. "Then he'll make things more interesting. Still, griffins aren't kind beasts, and if it's truly one of those creatures, it'll take more than bravado to bring it down." Kaylin nodded once, steady. "So, strategy." "Strategy?" Horian echoed, his grin sharpening into something more serious. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "First light, we find the trails. Feathers, tracks, blood, whatever crumbs it's left us. We move fast, before the others get too far ahead." His gaze flicked between them, bright and fierce. "And when it comes to claws and wings, we stand together, or we die separate." The room fell quiet but for the muffled murmur of the inn below. Izzi's daggers felt heavier at her hips, the weight of the half-elf's warning still lodged in her chest. The three of them sat in the dim inn room, the candle guttering low on the table. For a moment, no one spoke. The silence hummed with the weight of the task before them. Izzi broke it first, her arms still folded tight across her chest. "These things will eat anyone who doesn't know what they're doing." Horian tilted his head, brow furrowing. "What?" something he said. Her eyes narrowed at the memory of the man's cold tone, the certainty in it. "The hunter I crossed downstairs." The way he spoke, it was like he knew more than he was letting on. She leaned back against the wall, fingers brushing the hilt of her dagger. "If it is a griffin, we can't assume it's alone. There could be more, a nesting pair even." Kaylin grunted, but it wasn't disagreement. His scarred arms folded across his chest, steady gaze fixed on her. "You're right, they don't mate often, but when they do, they guard the nest fiercely. If there's more than one, we'll need to be careful." "Careful," Horian repeated with a dry laugh. "You sound like old men planning a harvest." Still, his grin softened into something more serious as he leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "But you're right, stealth first. If we can track it quietly, maybe even catch it grounded, we'll have a chance to end it quick." Izzi nodded, her violet-gray eyes sharp in the flickering candlelight. "No blundering into the mountains like fools. We move quiet, watch for signs. Feathers, claw marks, bones. We strike only when we have to." Kaylin shifted, his greatsword resting against the wall beside him, its hilt catching the faint glow. "If it comes down to a fight, it'll be brute force. My blade," Horian's noise. "You stay fast, Iz. Dart in, dart out, cut where it's weak." "Claws, wings, throat?" she murmured, already mapping it in her mind. "Good," Horian said, his grin returning, though tempered now. "We'll bleed it before it knows which way to strike." He clapped his hands together once, the sound sharp in the stillness. "Simple plan. Stealth until it fails, brute force when it does. And if there's more than one, then we adapt," Kaylin finished. Izzi's gaze lingered on the flame of the candle, words echoing still in her skull. "These things will eat anyone who doesn't know what they're doing." She swallowed hard, not sure if she was more unsettled by his warning or the way it made her listen. Later, the room sank into silence. Horian had claimed the floor, his broad frame sprawled across a heap of blankets, one arm flung over his eyes, chest rising and falling with steady snores. Kalen sat in the lone chair beside the bed, boots still on, his greatsword leaned within arm's reach. His head tilted back against the wall, eyes closed, though the faint twitch of his hand told Izzi he wasn't quite asleep. Izzi lay on the bed, sheets drawn to her waist, arms folded behind her head. The candle had burned itself down to a stub, shadows climbing high across the beams. She stared into them for a long while, the memory of green eyes and runes cutting through her thoughts like shards of glass. "Kalen," she whispered. One of his eyes cracked open, glinting in the dim light. "Hmm?" She hesitated, then turned her head toward him. "At the bar, I met someone. Half-elf. Said he was here for the beast too." Kalen's brow lifted slightly, though his voice stayed low and calm. "Competition." "More than that," Izzi murmured. "He was different. Cold. Dismissive. He knew things. Spoke like he already understood the beast better than anyone here. And the way he looked at me," her ears twitched, embarrassed. "Like I was a child trying to play at something I didn't understand." Kalen let out a slow breath, tilting his head back again. "Let him think what he likes. Words don't win fights. We'll see how clever he is when steel sings." Izzi smiled faintly at that, though it faded quickly. Her mind wouldn't let go, the bandages spiraling up his arm, the silver cuff in his ear that matched her own, and most of all the runes curling across his left arm, pulsing faintly with life she couldn't read. She sighed softly, rolling onto her side. "Saints. I wish Renlin were here. He could have read them, told me what they meant." Kalen didn't answer, and after a while she realized his breathing had evened into sleep. She stayed awake, staring at the faint glow of the shutters cracks, the man's words echoing in her skull. "These things will eat anyone who doesn't know what they're doing." The sheets rustled as she buried herself deeper beneath them, but the thought lingered all the same, heavy as stone. Chapter 7. The Empty Trail. The inn's common room smelled of burnt oats and weak ale. Their breakfast was as rough as the mood that hung over the town. Bread baked hard as stone, porridge thinned with too much water, and a silence thick enough to make even Horian's booming voice feel smaller. Kalen ate without complaint, chewing methodically. Horian grumbled between mouthfuls, muttering about how Cerulea's rest knew how to feed people properly. Izzi pushed her spoon through the gray slop without much appetite, her mind still circling the memory of green eyes, bandaged arms, and runes that seemed to pulse in her thoughts even now. When they stepped out into the chill morning air, the town was already tense. Villagers stood in knots, whispering, their faces pale in the light of dawn. Dogs barked, carts stood abandoned in the square, and every pair of eyes seemed fixed toward the mountains. Horian, never shy, stopped one of the townsfolk, a woman with tired eyes and a basket of wilted greens. "What's the word here, friend? What hunts your trail?" She glanced at him, then quickly at Kalen's sword and Izzi's daggers, her mouth tight. "The beast," she whispered, "combs down the cliffs when the sun falls. Wings like storm clouds, claws that carry a man as easy as a rabbit. No one who's taken ever comes back." Her gaze darted to the mountains, then away as if afraid they were listening. Another villager nearby muttered, "It's the griffin. Has to be." Heads nodded around him, though none looked certain. Before Izzi could press for more, a woman's gasp cut the square short. Loud. Sharp. It happened again! The three of them exchanged glances, no need for further talk, and set off at once. They ran through the cobbled streets, boots striking hard, following the rising commotion. Out through the northern gate, up the dirt track that wound into the dark teeth of the mountain trail. The chill bit sharper here, the scent of pine and stone strong in the air. When they rounded the bend, they saw it. 2 wagons sat in the middle of the trail. Both were intact, wheels unbroken, canvas covers still tied tight. One cart, however, had tipped onto its side, its goods spilled across the dirt, sacks of grain torn open, the contents soaking into the mud. The horses were gone, their traces snapped. No drivers, no guards, no merchants. Just silence, heavy and absolute. Nothing but him. The half-elf stood in the center of the wreckage, framed by the jagged cliffs above. His swords were sheathed across his back, but his posture was coiled, every line of him alive with readiness. His green eyes lifted as they approached, the bandaged arm flexing once at his side. "You're late," he said, voice calm, almost disappointed. Izzi's pulse quickened, her hand drifting unconsciously to the hilt of her dagger. Horian was the first to move, his heavy boots splashing through spilled grain as he strode toward the wagons. Kaelin followed at his side, eyes scanning the empty seats, the snapped traces where horses should have been tethered. "What happened here?" Horian barked, his voice carrying off the stone walls. He didn't answer. He was crouched near the overturned cart, fingertips brushing the dirt with practiced care, his green eyes sharp and calculating. He turned a grain husk over once in his hand, then let it fall, his gaze narrowing to the faint scuffs in the mud. Kaelin stepped closer, looming over him. He said, "What happened here?" The half-elf rose in one fluid motion, not even glancing at the greatsword hovering near his shoulder. His words came quiet, stoic. "Caravans deserted." Kaelin's jaw tightened. "I can see that," he snapped, voice rough. "You always this helpful?" Izzi's ears twitched at the bite in his tone. For once, she understood it. This man's cold detachment, his certainty, it gnawed the same way it had gnawed at her in the inn. Before Kaelin could press again, Horian called from the far side of the wagon. "Tracks! Here, look!" He was kneeling, thick fingers pressed into the prints scored into the mud, pulled upward, heavy drag marks. Whatever it was, it took them toward the mountain path. Izzi crossed quickly, her braids swinging over her shoulder as she crouched beside him. Faint grooves marred the dirt, wagon-sized ruts and smaller scuffs, the marks of boots or heels sliding against stone. A struggle? A panic? When she turned her head, he was already walking away, down the lower path that branched from the trail, long strides unhurried, his broad sword swaying across his back. He didn't spare them a glance. Izzi's chest tightened. "He's leaving us behind!" "Hey!" Izzi's voice cut across the trail. He stopped mid-stride. For a heartbeat he stood still, the weight of the mountains pressing around them before he turned. His green eyes found hers, cold, dull, and tired, as though every word spoken to him was another stone added to his burden. "It's serious," he said. Izzi's breath caught, but she forced herself forward, her boots crunching against the dirt. This time she swallowed her pride, letting the bite in her voice soften. "Serious? What are you thinking?" His brows lifted faintly, surprise flickering across his face before the mask returned. He crossed his arms over his chest, the bandaged one tightening with the motion. "Fine, elf, this is all you get." His voice carried like stone cracking against stone. "Look at the scene, tell me what you see." Izzi glanced back at the overturned wagon, at the snapped traces, the grain scattered across the dirt. She started, but her words faltered. Sirius's mouth twitched in something between disdain and weariness. "Exactly." Her ears burned, her lip curling faintly as she turned back toward him. But before she could press, his voice snapped sharp across the trail. "Go kill your bird!" The words hung heavy, louder than the echo they made against the cliffs. And then he started striding down the lower path, leaving Izzi with her question burning and no answer but his dismissal. Izzi stood rooted where Sirius had left her, his words still ringing in her ears. "Go kill your bird!" Her gaze drifted back toward the wagons. She forced herself to walk slowly, eyes raking over the scene with deliberate care. The caravan wasn't shattered, not really. The wagons were still whole, the crates still lashed, only one cart tipped onto its side. No blood on the ground, no shredded cloth, no torn shoes scattered in panic. A griffin attack, if it truly had been one, should have left chaos in its wake. Broken wood, ripped harness, deep furrows from claws, the wreckage of a struggle. Instead, the place felt abandoned, hollow, as though the people had simply stepped away. She crouched near the snapped traces, fingers brushing the leather where the horses had been torn free. Too clean, too quiet. Kaelin's voice carried behind her, steady and low. Horian went on ahead, trail climbs sharp. He wanted to see if the tracks carried higher. Izzi straightened, brushing dirt from her palms, her lips pressed thin. "Kael, doesn't it bother you? There's no mess here, no fight, no blood, just gone." Kaelin studied the wagons, his scarred face unreadable. After a long pause, he nodded once. "Strange. Strange," Izzi echoed, her voice tight. Her violet-gray eyes flicked back toward the path Sirius had taken. The silver cuff in his ear flashed again in her memory, unbidden. Kaelin shifted his greatsword on his back. "Still, the bird's the best lead we've got." She sighed, reluctantly agreeing. "Then we stay on course." Together, they turned toward the mountain trail, the wagon silent behind them, as if holding on to secrets neither of them yet knew how to read. Izzi and Kaelin moved quickly, following the trail upward until Horian's broad frame came back into view. He crouched on a rocky outcrop, his cloak pressed tight against the wind, one hand raised in silent greeting. "Trail runs higher," he murmured when they reached him, his voice quieter than they were used to. His usual booming energy seemed tempered by the weight of the mountains. Whatever took those folk, it carried them this way. From there, the climb grew steeper. They moved single file along a path carved more by claws and hooves than men, hugging the cliff face when the rock fell away into shadowed ravines. Izzi led the way at times, quick and careful, her sharp eyes sweeping for broken feathers, scraps of cloth, or claw marks etched into stone. Kaelin's bulk brought up the rear, his greatsword balanced easily against his back, though every now and then he'd press a hand to the rock to steady Izzi when the trail narrowed too thin. Caves and crevices gaped along the mountainside, yawning dark and hollow. They checked each one they dared, moving quiet, blades at the ready. Once, Izzi drew a dagger and pointed to faint scratch marks along the inside of a cave mouth. Too shallow for a griffin's claws, but sharp enough to set her ears twitching. "Not our quarry," Kaelin muttered, pulling her back. "Bear den. We'd best leave it sleeping." So they did, slipping away as the sound of a low growl rumbled faint from within. The higher they climbed, the thinner the air became, sharp and cold in their lungs. Their boots crunched on loose scree, stones tumbling down into the black valleys below. Once, a mountain cat padded into their path, its fur bristling silver in the moonlight. It stared at them, tail lashing, before Kaelin stepped forward, his presence alone enough to send it vanishing back into the shadows. Hours seemed to pass beneath the sweep of the stars, the trail endless, until finally the path widened and the wind grew sharper, cutting across their faces with a sting. The jagged ridge opened into a plateau, and there, resting in the crook of the peak, they found it. A nest. The thing was enormous, easily spanning 20 paces across. Branches thicker than Izzi's legs had been hauled here, tangled with bones bleached white by sun and wind. Shards of horn, the rusted heads of weapons, and scraps of torn leather were woven into its structure like trophies. Feathers, long, silvered, edged in black, drifted across the ground, some as wide as her arm. The air smelled faintly of musk and iron. Izzi froze, her breath catching in her throat. "Gods," she whispered. Horian's grin was gone. Even he seemed struck silent by the sight of it. Kaelin drew a slow breath, his hand on the hilt of his greatsword. So the tales were true. They moved in silence, every footfall measured. The wind whistled thin across the peak, carrying the smell sharper now, copper, rot, and musk thick in the air. Izzi's stomach turned before she even saw it. At the edge of the nest, they crouched low, peering between branches thicker than a man's arm. What they found froze them. A griffin's body sprawled across the heart of the nest. Once majestic, its wings now lay in tatters, feathers dulled, matted with dried blood. The ribcage had been split wide, bones snapped like kindling. Its beak, once curved like a blade, was shattered, hanging at an unnatural angle. The stink of old blood clawed at their throats, sour and heavy. Izzi lifted a hand to her mouth, eyes wide. Saints above. But movement caught her eye. Nestled in the corpse, pressed against the griffin's torn flank, a smaller body stirred. A fledgling, its feathers soft, not yet hardened, its talons small. It nuzzled blindly into its mother's ruin, then stilled again, breathing slow, asleep in the only warmth left to it. The three of them exchanged looks, none daring to breathe too loud. Kaelin's hand tightened on his sword hilt, but he didn't draw it. He simply gave a small shake of his head, urging retreat. Step by step, they eased back from the rim of the nest, until the stench thinned enough to breathe without gagging. Horian bent low near the rocks, his face stripped of its usual grin, voice a whisper. "That's no predator. Not anymore." Izzi's violet-gray eyes flicked over the nest again. No bones, no human remains, only the griffin's own carcass, its young, and the smaller skeletons of mountain prey, hares, goats, foxes, woven into the structure. Her ears twitched, her scarred lip tightening. No merchants, no guards, no villagers, just a slaughtered beast in its own nest. Kaelin frowned, his scarred hands flexing. "Then what's taking the people?" The wind rose, hissing through the rocks, carrying the stench of death with it. Izzi shivered, not from the cold, but but from the certainty that the mountain held darker secrets than a griffin's shadow. They lingered at the edge of the nest, the wind carrying the stench of death down the slope. The fledgling stirred once more, letting out a soft, plaintive cry, and curled back into its mother's ruined chest. Kaelin's jaw tightened. It'll grow, and when it does... He didn't need to finish. Izzi's throat tightened, her ears pulling back. Saints, it's just a bird. It's a predator, Kaelin said evenly. It won't know how not to be. Silence pressed between them until Horian exhaled sharply, rubbing his jaw. Best done quick. Better than letting the thing starve slow or tear some shepherd apart a year from now. Kaelin nodded once. He moved with quiet finality, drawing his blade but softening the swing. A single strike. Clean, merciful. The sound was over in an instant. Izzi looked away, her chest hollow, her nails digging into her palms. Kaelin wrapped the small body in a sack, knotting it closed. We'll take it back. Tell the chief the truth, make our dinner, and let the dead lie where they belong. His voice was low, steadier than the shadow in his eyes. The three turned from the nest, beginning the long descent. The climb down was easier on their lungs, but heavier on their thoughts. By the time the lower trees came back into sight, the air was thick with pine and the sound of trickling streams. The village roofs were faint specks below, lanterns beginning to glow against the twilight. The three paused on a rocky shelf, catching their breath, the sack with the fledgling's body heavy in Kaelin's hand. Izzi crouched low, eyes scanning the valley. If the griffin's dead, then it wasn't the one taking people. No bodies, no signs of a struggle at the nest, just an animal killed in its home. Kaelin frowned, his scarred hand tightening on the sack. Then what did it? Not the griffin, Izzi said firmly. Her voice carried more conviction than comfort. Something else. Something clever. Sirius knew it. Horian stood with his arms folded, jaw tight, for once without his usual grin. Aye. Bastard's keeping something from us. If he's still on that trail, then we follow him. Get our answers the hard way if we must. They all nodded. Tomorrow they'd track Sirius. For now, they needed to return to the village, deliver their truth, and find their footing. Izzi drew a slow breath, letting the mountain wind whip across her ears. We'll tell the chief, then we find Sirius. But before Kaelin could answer, the undergrowth ahead exploded with a roar. A bear, massive and scar-ridged, burst from the trees, its eyes wild with hunger. It barreled toward them in a mad dash, claws tearing up stone, jaws open in a froth of rage. Izzi's hands barely touched her daggers before the beast slammed its head into her ribs. The world tilted, air rushing past her ears, sky, stone, nothing but the void as she toppled backward over the cliff's edge. Izzi! Kaelin's voice thundered, raw and ragged. Horian's cry echoed it, booming against the stone. The bear wheeled, bloodlust burning in its eyes, and lunged for them both. The bear wheeled on them with a roar, foam slathering its jaws. Kaelin's greatsword came free in a flash, meeting claw and teeth in a storm of steel and blood. Horian barreled forward with a shout, drawing the beast's attention long enough for Kaelin to swing wide. The fight was brutal. Claws raked Kaelin's left arm, carving deep into muscle. Blood poured hot down his wrist, but he didn't falter, every strike of his sword driven by Izzi's scream in his ears. Horian feinted left, throwing his weight behind a heavy blow that drove the bear sideways. Kaelin seized the opening, twisting, and with a ragged shout he split the beast's throat. It collapsed in a spray of crimson, its final growl shuddering into silence. Kaelin dropped to one knee, clutching his torn arm, breath ragged. A new scar carved its place there, one that would never fade. Horian stood over the carcass, chest heaving, untouched but grim. His eyes turned immediately toward the cliff's edge. Go, he said. I'll see to this. Kaelin didn't hesitate. Blood dripping from his arm, he sprinted down the narrow path that wound beneath the ridge, calling her name into the dark ravine below. Izzi! The mountain swallowed his voice, the silence after it heavier than the strike of any blade. Darkness held her first, heavy, suffocating, then pain, a deep, jagged ache that ran through her ribs and chest, every breath sharp as knives. Izzi's eyes fluttered open, her vision swam, shapes bending in the gloom until the flicker of flame steadied them. The crackle of fire filled the alcove, its smoke mingling with the damp breath of rain outside. Thunder rolled across the mountains, shaking the stone above. You're alive? The voice was low, edged with surprise, but unmistakable. She blinked hard, forcing her eyes to focus. Across the fire, Sirius crouched, turning a branch until it spat sparks. His green eyes glowed faint in the firelight, sharp as glass. Pain lanced her side when she tried to shift, dragging a hiss from between her teeth. "You must be stubborn," Sirius said without looking up. "Most wouldn't have survived a fall like that." Izzi let out a strained laugh, her voice dry. "Stubborn's one word for it." The alcove came into focus around her, an elevated cleft of stone, half sheltered from the storm outside. Rain sheeted down just beyond, wind howling through the cracks, but here the fire kept the chill at bay. She tried to sit, and the blanket slipped from her shoulders. Heat rushed to her cheeks. Her top half was bare, save for bandages wound tight from collarbone to waist, fresh linen stained faintly pink. Izzi yanked the blanket back to her chest, glaring across the fire. Sirius didn't flinch. "Don't worry, I only patched you up. Your clothes are behind you, bloodied but intact." She swallowed, her head still reeling, but forced herself upright despite the flare of pain. "You did this? Patched me up? Didn't think you the type." At that, his eyes finally lifted to hers. For a moment, he just studied her, expression unreadable. Then he shrugged, tossing another branch into the fire. "Truthfully, I thought about leaving you." Her lip curled into a smirk despite the ache. "Why didn't you?" Sirius's gaze lingered on her, steady and unreadable. The fire popped between them. He paused longer than she expected, and when he finally spoke, it was quiet. "Don't know." The storm outside roared louder, thunder drowning the silence that followed. The fire spat sparks, shadows flickering over the alcove walls. Izzi sat propped against the stone, blanket clutched loosely around her chest, her breaths shallow and sharp with every movement. Across from her, Sirius worked in silence, feeding the flames, eyes dulled with exhaustion. "Find your bird?" he asked suddenly, voice cutting through the crackle. Izzi arched a brow, feigning calm though her ribs screamed with each breath. "Maybe." His gaze flicked toward her. "Disappointed?" She let out a slow exhale that almost passed for a laugh. "Should I be? Would have ruined your fun if we had." That drew the faintest twitch at the corner of his mouth, though it wasn't a smile. He studied her, firelight carving harsh lines across his tired face. Izzi held his gaze, violet gray eyes narrowing. There was something heavy in him, something that bent his shoulders in ways no wound could. It reminded her of herself, of nights alone on cold roads carrying scars too deep to show. The blanket slipped as she shifted, sliding down to her stomach. Pale firelight caught the white bandages wrapped across her chest. She didn't pull it up this time, just let the moment linger as she tilted her head. "Those earrings?" she said softly. She turned, brushing her hair back to show her own silver cuff, the same design catching the glow. "Yours?" "They're the same." Sirius's jaw tightened. For a long moment he said nothing, then at last his voice came low. "A gift. From someone long ago." He paused, eyes flickering to the fire. "From VIII." The name struck like a blade in her gut, her ears twitched, her breath caught. VIII. Her home. The place she had been banished from, the city she'd buried in memory but never truly escaped. Izzi swallowed hard, her hand brushing unconsciously against her scarred lip. "VIII," she echoed, her voice barely more than a whisper. For once, Sirius didn't look at her. He stared into the fire as if it might consume the weight of what he'd said. The fire snapped, casting gold across the stone, shadows flickering over Sirius's face. Izzi's fingers toyed absently with the edge of the blanket at her waist, her chest rising and falling shallow with the ache in her ribs. "Are you from there?" she asked finally, her voice low, fragile as smoke. "VIII? Or your family?" At that, Sirius grew still, the pause stretched long, the fire hissing in the silence. When he turned his gaze to her, it was sharp, knowing, like he could read every unspoken thought behind her eyes. "My mother was," he said at last. His voice carried the weight of stone. "A story for another time." He shifted back, resting against the alcove wall, his broad swords laid across his lap. His green eyes didn't leave her, steady and unreadable, watching every twitch of her ears, every shallow breath. Izzi pressed herself deeper into the rock, the blanket slipping slightly lower again. Pain raked her chest, each inhale hot, uneven. She stared back at him, violet gray eyes roving over his tired face, his bandaged arm, the runes coiling faintly on his skin. "You should rest," Sirius said quietly, though there was no softness in it, just command, steady and cold. Their eyes locked, the firelight between them burning hotter than the storm outside. Izzi's lips parted, breath ragged. "I know you." The words broke apart as her strength failed her head lolled to the side, body yielding to exhaustion. Sirius stood slowly, pulling the blanket back up over her shoulders. For a long moment he hovered there, his hand lingering before he drew back. He lowered himself once more against the wall, the firelight casting his profile in stark shadow. His gaze lingered on the sleeping elf, her face pale against the bandages. For the first time his expression shifted, sorrow pooling deep in his eyes, sorrow for something he would not name. The storm raged on, thunder rolling across the mountain, but within the alcove only the fire and his silence remained. Chapter 8: Fog and Singing. Izzi woke to a cold stone at her back and a sky the color of ash. The fire had died to a smear of charcoal, its last heat bled into the rock. Someone, Sirius, had left a stub of torch wedged in a crack, its little flame guttering, just enough to keep the dark from swallowing the alcove whole. Pain arrived with her first full breath, a band of knives cinched tight around her ribs. She gritted her teeth, sucked air slow through her nose, and pushed herself upright. The blanket slid. Fresh linen bound her from collarbone to waist, already pink where blood had pressed through. Her clothes were a rumpled heap behind her, damp with old rain and iron. Outside, the storm had passed. No rain, no thunder, only a thick, wet fog drawn low across the mountains, muting the world to a soft hush. She stood, one arm clamping her ribs, the other balancing on the stone. The bandages needed changing, she wasn't in shape to try. A smell caught then, faint at first, then insistently worse. Sweet sour rot, old meat. It seeped from the back of the alcove, from the dark the torch couldn't reach. "I don't need this," she muttered, and went anyway. Each step made the stench swell. The torch in her hand threw a short, jittering halo, beyond it shapes. In a quick lift of flame she saw them clearly. Heaped bones, snapped and gnawed, half-eaten torsos, the slump of arms and legs stripped to sinew, a mountain of what was left behind. Her stomach lurched. She stumbled backward, banged her hip on the rock, and forced herself toward the opening. Cool fog kissed her face. She gulped it like water and half ran, half hobbled out into the broom. "Sirius?" she called, voice too thin to carry. The ache in her chest spiked and stole the rest. Something else answered. A sound braided through the fog, first a thread, then a ribbon. A woman's voice, distant and clear as a bell struck underwater. It wound between the pines and over stone, sorrow and sweetness folded together, the kind of tune you follow without meaning to. Izzi's ears flared, every hair along her arms rising. She felt the pain dull under it, felt the tug, not in her muscles but in the center of her. "Come," the song said, "come and be held, come and be unburdened." "Beautiful," she breathed, barely aware she'd said it. She followed. Fog clung to her ankles, moss slicked the stones. The song swelled. Ahead, a creek cut the slope, its water black and silver. On a flat rock by the bank sat a woman, naked save for the river's sheen and a curtain of long brown hair that poured down her back, veiling her breasts as if by design. She sang without effort, throat open, head tilted so the song could pour clean into the morning. Izzi drifted closer, the torch sagging in her hand. The woman turned, smile soft, arms opening in welcome. Safety poured off her like heat. Pain belonged to someone else. Izzi stepped onto the slick stone, reached out. The girl's jaw split. It unfurled like a hinge, doubling wide, cheeks tearing into a rictus that showed rows of crooked teeth, jagged and hungry. The song didn't stop. It twisted, slipped sharper, a blade in velvet. The thing lunged for Izzi's throat. Steel flashed. Sirius came out of the fog behind it, a blur of black cloth and pale rune. His hand clamped the creature's hair, yanking its head back. His dagger punched clean into the soft of its throat. No flourish. No sound but a wet, startled gurgle. He ripped the blade sideways, let the body crumple into the creek where the current took the blood in a widening curl. The song died. The world slammed back. Pain returned like a hammer. Izzi dropped to her knees on the wet stone and braced herself, the torch clattering into the moss. Breath came ragged, the creek hissed past, indifferent. She looked up. The siren's face lay half-submerged, that beautiful mask ruined by its own teeth. Sirius wiped his dagger on the thing's hair, eyes on Izzi. "I told you," he said, voice flat as the rock. "They'll eat anyone who doesn't know what they're doing." She would have laughed if it didn't hurt. Instead, she winced and managed. Lovely timing. He sheathed the blade without ceremony, stepped into her space, and lifted her, one arm behind her shoulders, the other under her knees. Heat rushed to her cheeks despite the cold. He didn't look at her, his gaze flicked once over the fog, measuring, then back toward the alcove. "Clothes," he said simply. He carried her up to the shelter, set her down with care, and turned his back while she dragged the blood-damp garments on under the blanket's cover, every movement a flare of fire along her ribs. When she was done, he crouched and offered his forearms. She looped her arms over his shoulders, felt the knit of bandage beneath his sleeve, the steady strength that made lifting her seem nothing at all. They left the alcove behind, the torch snuffed, the pile of bones swallowed by the fog. Sirius picked his way down the slope as if he knew every slick stone, every broken root, the weight of her never breaking his rhythm. The mist thinned the farther they went. Somewhere below, a village waited, and questions sharper than any claw. Izzi pressed her forehead to his shoulder to keep the world from spinning, breath hot against his collar. He didn't speak, neither did she. Sirius came out of the fog with Izzi in his arms and a ribbon of blood pattering from her torn tunic to the cobbles. The town had shaken off the storm, but not its fear. Doors were cracked, not opened. Faces leaned out only as far as caution allowed. "Gods!" someone breathed near the well. "The Griffin's taken another," another voice said, half gasp, half prayer. "Look at her! Poor thing! Get the healer!" Sirius didn't slow. His jaw was set, eyes forward, footfalls hard enough to echo. The smear of red trailed behind them, thin and steady. A dog slunk out, sniffed at the copper in the air, and whined as he passed. A boy reached to follow and was snatched back by a mother's hand. The inn's lanterns burned warmer than the street. The moment he crossed the threshold, the keeper at the desk, sharp-eyed, gray-plated, looked from Izzi's face to Sirius's and back again. The ledger's quill stopped mid-scratch. "Room," Sirius said, already moving for the stairs. "And your healer," she didn't argue. The chair scraped back, skirts snapped. "Emil! Run, fetch Master Den!" Her voice blurred down the hall as she vanished, the door banging in her wake. Sirius shouldered open the door to his room and laid Izzi on the bed. She was dead weight and heat, breath ragged and shallow. Her lashes fluttered. Broken words spilled out in a fevered whisper, names and not names tangled in pain. He slid a pillow beneath her head and bent to the buckles of her leathers with quick, practiced fingers. "Easy," he muttered to no one. "Easy." The straps gave. He peeled back stiffened cloth, then the tunic beneath, careful to keep what modesty he could. The bandages he'd wrapped on the mountain were soaked through along her right side. He worked the linen free. The breath caught in his throat before he could stop it. From collarbone to hip, her ribs were one vast bruise, livid and blackening at the edges, the color of thunderheads. Fine cuts laddered her flank and stomach. A deeper gash along the lower ribs seeped, stubborn as the woman herself. Both arms were mottled with impact, but they bent as they should. A miracle, he thought. Then a bitter aftertaste, should have come sooner. He set his pack beside her and rolled his sleeves. A vial uncorked, the clean sting of strong spirit. A twist of cloth, a needle and thread drawn through a waxed pouch. He cleaned every cut until she hissed even in sleep, then stitched the worst with hands steady as a surgeon's. In, out, tie, in, out, tie. He crushed a measure of dried comfrey and yarrow between his palms, mixed it with salve in a small tin, and pressed the paste into the cleaned wounds. New bandages went on snug and sure, white over the map of purple blooming beneath. He checked the wrap with 2 fingers under the edge until the pressure was firm but not cruel. When he was done, he dipped a cloth in cool water and wrung it until it stopped dripping. He laid it across her brow, her breath evened a fraction. The tightness in his chest loosened not at all. "So stubborn," he said softly, sitting back on his heels. "Too stubborn to die." He pulled the blanket up to her waist, leaving the clean bandages to breathe, and rose as footsteps ran hard down the corridor. The door opened without knocking. A man in a wool coat, hair white, eyes needle bright, stepped in with a leather case and the innkeeper at his shoulder. "Master Den?" Sirius said. "Found her on the mountain. Fell from a high place." The healer went to the bedside without ceremony. His hands were quick but not unkind. 2 fingers to the pulse at Izzi's throat, ear to her ribs, a gentle press along bruised bone. He lifted the edge of Sirius's work, peered at the stitches, and made a small sound in his throat. "You do this?" he asked without looking away. "Yes. It shows." Den straightened, nodded once. "Clean lines, right depth. You've a talent for the ugly parts." He He snapped open his case, brought out a crock and a folded packet of leaves. I can ease the hurt, help the bruising break up. Nothing's broken that I can feel. Saints favor her. Falls like that don't often spare the inside. He set the packet on the bedside table. Steep this when she wakes. Sip, not gulp. Ointment for the bruises, 2 fingers' breadth, morning and night. He paused, studying Sirius with a speculative tilt. If you're staying, I could put you to work. We're short a second pair of hands. You stitch like a man who's done it too often to be bad at it. No, Sirius said, not unkindly. I won't be here long. Shame. Den closed his case. Then she's in your keeping tonight. I'll return at first light. He glanced to the innkeeper. Broth when she can take it. Water, small sips. The keeper bobbed her head. Aye. At the door, Den looked back once more at Izzi's sleeping face, at the clean bandages and the map of storm-dark bruises framing them. A miracle, he said simply. Try not to waste it. They left. The latch clicked. Silence gathered, a thin, late-hour quiet, all the town's worries damped but not gone. Sirius took the chair by the bed and folded his bandaged forearm against his ribs. Izzi mumbled once, turned her face to the cool cloth and stilled. He waited. The room smelled of spirit, crushed herb, and rain. Outside, somewhere far below, a dog barked its single warning at the dark and fell quiet again. He watched the rise and fall of her chest, watched the pulse in her throat, watched until the muscles in his jaw ached from holding. Too stubborn, he said again, softer, as if the words were a charm that might keep her tethered. And he kept his seat. Sirius scrubbed at the pump behind the inn until the water ran pink, then pale, then clear. The cold bit his skin. His knuckles were already split, the bandage on his forearm wet through along one edge. He turned his hands under the stream until the sting brought him back into himself, then shook them dry and stared a moment at the dark crescents of blood beneath his nails. The stink of sirens still clung in the memory, river-cold flesh, metallic breath. Inside, the taproom held the late hush of a town that sleeps in fear, low fire, a few men hunched over cups, the clink of glass softened by nerves. Sirius took a stool at the bar and lifted 2 fingers without looking up. Something strong, he said. The innkeep slid a squat bottle and a clean glass across to him. He poured, swallowed, felt the heat move down like coals. The second went down slower. His green eyes were tired, rimmed red, the lids heavy enough to make a scowl out of neutral silence. The door banged wide. An elf? Horian's voice burst into the quiet like a thrown chair. He was all wind and mud and fury, hair wild, eyes bright, chest heaving as he strode straight to the desk. I heard, townsfolk said, a female elf was carried in. Where? The innkeep's head snapped up, then sideways to the bar, then back. Aye, she said, voice low to damp the blast of him. Upstairs. The hunter brought her. Master Den. Horian was already swinging, scanning the room with a predator's quick sweep. He found Sirius at the bar and his mouth pulled into a blade-thin line. You, he said. Sirius didn't turn. He lifted the glass, swallowed the last of it, and set it down with a quiet click. Me. Horian took 2 long strides and stopped close enough for Sirius to smell salt and bear on him. Where is she? Sleeping, Sirius said. Healer's orders. What happened? Horian's voice had dropped, but the thunder was still in it. They said you carried her in. From where? What did you do? Saved her life. Sirius finally turned, meeting the big man's glare without a blink. Where were you? Horian's jaw worked. For a heartbeat, something like gratitude flickered, and then pride shoved it down. Take me to her. No. The word landed like a thrown coin on stone. A few heads turned. The innkeep froze with a cloth in her hands. Say that again, Horian said, very softly. Sirius's expression didn't change. You'll wake her. She needs quiet, not your shouting. One of you goes up and sits with her. The other waits here and stays out of the way. He slid the empty glass back toward the bottle. Pick which. Horian's hands curled and uncurled. For a long breath, he looked like a man deciding between a punch and a swallow. The swallow won, barely. He blew out air through his nose, dragged a palm over his face, and some of the wildness bled off. Fine, he said, voice rough. Kaylin's still out looking. I'll sit. Sirius stood, the stool rasping back. Quietly, he said, and left the bottle where it was. They climbed the stairs with Horian's fury tamped down to a tight, vibrating wire. At the door, Sirius paused, a hand on the latch. She's bandaged, he said. Flat warning, not apology. Don't go fussing at her wraps. Don't wake her to prove you care. Horian swallowed hard, nodded once. Open the door. Sirius did. Inside, the room held the soft rasp of Izzi's breath. Izzi lay on the bed, bandages stark white against bruised skin, her breath shallow but steady. A damp cloth rested across her brow. The lamplight was low, the air thick with the sharp bite of spirit and crushed herbs. Horian froze in the doorway, the breath leaving him in one heavy gust. "Saints," he whispered. Relief cracked through his booming voice, leaving something rawer behind. "She's alive. She needs rest," Sirius said. Horian nodded, eyes fixed on Izzi. "Will you be near?" "Downstairs," Sirius replied. "Good." Horian lingered a moment longer, then turned back to the hall. "Kaelin's still out searching. I'll go find him, tell him she's safe." He paused. "Thank you," he said. He left at a run, boots thundering down the stairwell, the sound fading into the inn's quiet. Sirius stayed a moment longer in the doorway, watching the elf steady rise and fall beneath the bandages, before pulling the latch shut and returning to the bar. Sirius stood posted at Izzi's door with a bottle loose in his hand. He had drunk enough to fell a lesser man. On him it laid like a second coat, quieting the edges, not the stance. He listened to the inn breathe, the low fire, the distant clink of crockery, the echo of his own pulse. Footfalls pounded the stairs. Horian rounded the corner first, Kaelin a heartbeat behind, face drawn tight, hair damp with sweat. Sirius straightened. "Healer says she's stable, nothing broken. She needs dark and quiet. One person in at a time, water in small sips when she wakes. Don't touch the bandages." His voice was flat, the words clean despite the bottle. Kaelin didn't wait for more, he shouldered past, Sirius yielding a half-step with the lazy sway of a man who'd let the drink loosen his hinge. For an instant his expression slipped. Something tired, something older, then it sealed again. Horian's big hand landed on Sirius's shoulder, a firm pat that grounded the corridor. "Really, thank you, man." The bluster was gone, what was left was plain. Sirius gave the smallest nod and turned down the hall, the bottle tapping his thigh as he went. Kaelin eased the latch, slid into the room, and closed the door soft. He set his greatsword down along the wall, the steel kissing the floorboards with a careful scrape. The lamplight was low, the air sharp with spirit and herb. Izzi lay still beneath the blanket, the white of her fresh wraps stark against the bloom of bruises. He pulled the chair to the left side of the bed and sat. For a long moment he only watched her, counting the rise and fall, chasing each breath to the end as if it might be the last. He whispered. The word cracked. He reached and took her hand, rough fingers swallowing her smaller ones. "Thank the heavens." Silence pressed close. Kaelin bent his head, shoulders bowing as if under a new blade. "I'm sorry," he murmured, voice fraying to thread. "I let this happen. I should've—" The rest broke apart. He swallowed hard and tightened his grip, as if he could anchor her there by will alone. The room held his quiet sobbing, small, shuddering sounds that didn't fit a man his size, until even those settled into breath. Outside, the inn creaked and the town slept, and Kaelin kept his vigil on the left side of the bed, her hand in his, eyes fixed on the life he refused to lose. Rain had returned by the time Sirius stepped out of the inn. It ran off the eaves in silver cords, beading along the edge of his jaw, soaking his shirt in a breath. He tipped his head back to the bruised sky, eyes shut as if he could drown the last hours out of himself. Still more to do," he murmured, and turned toward the mountain. A fortnight fell away in slow shreds. Izzi rose and sank through it, surfacing into brief, fever-bright moments and then slipping under again. In the dim lamplight she muttered names like loose beads. Kaelin's, once Horian's, twice Sirius's, and, once, Celine's, like touching a blade by accident. Hands cooled her brow. Water came to her lips in careful sips. The inn breathed around her, the nap of linen, the sting of crushed herbs, footfalls that halted outside her door and moved on. Sometimes Horian snored on the floor, a mountain of blanket and boots. Sometimes Kaelin sat in the chair, unblinking, a stone carving of a man with a sword propped nearby, and a prayer gritted between his teeth. On the 15th morning, fog thinned to bare light, and Izzi opened her eyes and kept them open. Kaelin was there, exactly where she'd last seen him in the steady hours. Left side of the bed, elbows on knees, hands clasped until the knuckles blanched. Horian had succumbed to sleep on the floor, one arm flung across his face, mouth open in a most undignified gape. "She's awake," Kaelin said, the words half exhale, half marvel. He leaned forward, and for the first time in days, a smile cracked the hard line of his mouth. Izzi blinked against the grain of light and tried to sit. Pain flared. She sank back with a hiss. What happened? I remember. She searched her memory, found fog and a creak and a voice, and a hand catching a monster by the hair. Sirius, the siren. He saved me. Kaelin's brows lifted. He did more than carry you inside then. Surprise tugged at his voice despite himself. He patched me, she said, glancing down at the fresh wraps. Twice, I think. And it wasn't a griffin pulling folk from the trail. Sirens, calling them to the water and eating them. She swallowed, the taste of river copper still somewhere in her throat. There was a pile, in the alcove. Kaelin's gaze tightened with anger that wasn't for her. He nodded once. Horian found signs downriver. Bones in the reeds. On the floor, Horian snorted awake like a kicked mule, flailed, saw her eyes, and came upright in a tangle of blanket. The elf lives, he boomed, then winced and dropped to a whisper. The elf lives. Izzi managed a thin smile. Guess we didn't get that score then, she rasped, trying to tip the room back toward light with the old habit of a joke. Horian rubbed his face, hair a catastrophe, and huffed. Score's complicated, he said, then sighed. Chief wouldn't hear siren if you carved it into his door. He wanted a griffin to blame and a griffin to bury. He spread his hands. We gave him the fledgling Kaelin brought down as a token of good faith. That, and the fact no one's gone missing since, soothed him. Trade wagons are moving again. Izzi frowned. So, the bounty? Horian's grin flashed, softer than usual. He reached under the chair and thunked a heavy purse onto the table. Oh, the bounty he paid. The chief was sure we ended it when we handed him the fledgling. He pushed the purse toward Kaelin with 2 fingers. And I'm not modest, but I am fair. It's yours. Yours and Izzi's. I kept enough back for rooms and food and a decent bottle that I already killed. Kaelin blinked. Horian, don't start, Horian said, and for once there was no swagger in it. You two earned it. I swung hard, but you did the bleeding. Silence held a heartbeat, then Izzi let out a breath that almost felt like laughter. It hurt, she didn't care. Is Sirius still here? She asked, and tried to make it sound like idle curiosity. Kaelin shook his head. Haven't left your side, which was both answer and apology. Horian rolled his shoulders, the old grin creeping back to life. Haven't seen him in a few days. Before that, just at the bar most nights. Says 3 words when pressed and none of them friendly. Izzi stared at the ceiling a moment, hearing rain that wasn't there, a song that was long dead. The bandages held her tight. The ache reminded her that she still belonged to the world. Horian cut her a look that said he understood anyway. Kaelin squeezed her fingers, careful of the bruises. The inn breathed. Outside, wheels clattered over cobbles and a hawker called his wares, and the town remembered how to be a town again. The days that followed folded one atop the other, slow as cards turned by a tired hand. Izzi slept, woke, sipped what the healer left, drifted again. Between dreams, she found her mind circling the same orbit. Green eyes rimmed with exhaustion, a mouth that never quite chose a smile, a bandaged arm steadying a knife. Why leave without a word, she wondered, and then flushed, annoyed at herself for thinking of his face long enough to feel heat bloom in her cheeks. Mystery should have made her wary. Instead it tugged like a thread she couldn't stop worrying. On the 3rd morning, Kaelin shoulder-barged the door with a tray, the smell of porridge and fried bread haloing him. Think you'll be able to walk today? He asked, setting the tray near her knee. Traders are heading back to Cerulea's Rest. We can take a boat from there to the mainland. Horian says Hesta will keep us until you're fully mended. Izzi levered herself upright, teeth clenched until the room steadied. It'll be fine, she said, which wasn't true and didn't need to be. She eased her feet to the floor, tested weight. Her ribs burned for a few breaths and settled to a dull roar. He just left, she added before she could stop herself. Kaelin set the cup in her hand. Some men make noise when they go, some don't, he said simply. They met the caravan at the town's gate, 2 wagons rattling with crates and jars, oxen chewing their bits as if nothing in the world could ever be urgent. Horian bounced onto the tailboard with a flourish and offered it to Izzi like a stage. Your chariot, my lady, he boomed, then, seeing her flinch on the first jolt, softened. We'll take the back corner. Less rattle. The road did not agree. Every rut found her ribs, every stone tapped the bruise along her side as if testing for a hollow. She breathed through it, knuckles white on the rail, while Kaelin set himself to her windward, and Horian wove stories large enough to distract a small army. When the pain peaked, she stared at the line where the sky met the land and counted to 100, then started again. By late daylight, the air salted. The road tipped toward the sea and the world opened. Cerulea's Rest spread below like a painting finally unrolled, bluest waters you'll ever see, white sand smudged gold by evening, gulls stitching lazy hems across a rose-washed sky. Izzi's breath left her in a sound that might have been a laugh. The azure lanterns had already been lit, beads of honey fire along its balcony. Hesta spotted them from the steps and flourished a towel like a battle standard. Back in one piece? Mostly, she called, eyes flicking to Izzi with brisk concern. Rooms are ready, stew's on. And if you lot have brought trouble, leave it on the beach. Never, Horian lied, hand to heart. They climbed the steps. Izzi reached for the inn door, bracing her shoulder against the frame to keep from leaning to her sore side, and nearly collided as it swung inward. Sirius stepped out into the last light. He checked short with the instinct of a man who lives on edges, the bottle he carried tilting, green eyes snapping up. They were close enough that Izzi saw the pale seam of a healing cut high at his temple, the damp at the cuff where rain had caught him again, the faint dark of stubble roughening his jaw. For a half-breath, none of them moved. Izzi half leaning on the door, Horian stalled mid-quip behind her, Kaelin's hand hovering near her elbow out of habit. Sirius's gaze flicked over her, bandages beneath clean tunic, careful stance, color in her face, and something cooled in his shoulders, as if he set down an invisible weight. Careful, he said quietly, stepping aside to let her pass. Izzi's mouth had a dozen replies and chose none. She swallowed, found her balance, and slipped by. The salt evening breathed between them. The lantern over the lintel threw a coin of warm light across his cheekbone. Welcome back, Hesta chirped from behind the counter, blissfully unaware of the taut wire strung in the doorway. I'll get your keys. Thank you, Kaelin managed, the word hollow and real at once. Sirius shifted as if to go, the bottle tucked loose against his hip. He glanced to Kaelin, then to Horian, then back to Izzi, one heartbeat more than politeness required, and stepped down into the falling night. The sea took him in 3 strides, the dark swallowing the line of his shoulders. Izzi stood with her hand still on the door, ribs aching, pulse high as surf. She hated the way heat climbed her ears again. Horian opened his mouth to say something outrageous, and perhaps sensing the shape of her silence, closed it with a click instead. Upstairs, Kaelin said gently. Izzi nodded. She didn't look back until she reached the landing, and when she did, the street was empty, the last of the evening washed in blue. Only the ribbon of sea remained, whispering like a secret she wasn't yet ready to understand. Hesta leaned over the counter as the door swung shut behind Sirius, brows lifted. You 3 know the half-elf who just walked out? Kaelin angled his greatsword to rest it, eyes still on the doorway. Hunter. Keeps to himself, useful in a pinch, not much for manners. Horian snorted. Broody as a thunderhead, talks like every word costs coin. Rude, but he carried our girl out of death's pocket, so I'll drink to him. Both sets of eyes slid to Izzi. She set her palm on the desk to steady her ribs. He saved my life, she said, quiet but sure. Patched me up twice. He's not what he looks like from across a room. A beat. There's more to him. Oh ho. Hesta's smile went fox sharp. Sounds like somebody's gotten a bit interested. Heat snapped up Izzi's ears. That's not... She bit it off, forced a breath, kept her gaze level. I'm saying he's complicated. More to him. Hesta's chuckle was gentler than her words. She slid 3 keys across the polished wood. He's been here a few days, takes a bottle down to the beach at dusk and stares at the ocean like it owes him an answer. Pays on time, says little, eyes like someone who's walked too far. Horian wagged his brows at Izzi. Kaelin gave him a look that cut it short. 3rd floor, Hesta went on, tapping the keys. Seaside, stew's keeping warm. If you see trouble, leave it on the sand, house rules. Understood, Kaelin said, gathering the keys. Izzi risked one glance back through the doorway to the street washed in blue. The beach lay empty from here, only the surf moving, endless, patient. She swallowed whatever answer her heartbeat was trying to give her and followed the others up the stairs, Hesta's teasing and the hush of the ocean trailing after her like twin threads she couldn't quite untangle. They took their keys and drifted apart down the hall. Horian paused at his door, spread his arms to the corridor like a man greeting a stage. Home, he sighed, all grin and relief. If anyone needs me, I'll be scandalizing a pillow." He vanished with a whistle and the soft thud of boots tossed toward a wall. Kaelin walked Izzi to her room. His hand hovered, not quite touching her elbow. "You need anything?" She shook her head. "No. Sleep. Maybe." He searched her face, read the lie, and let it stand. "Good night, Iz." "Good night, Kaelin." Inside, the room smelled faintly of salt and soap. On the chair lay the outfit Horian had arranged for her the last time, a soft, low-cut top that left a ribbon of midriff bare, a silk wrap skirt that fell like water, a light shawl for modesty if she wanted it. Izzi stood over the bundle a long moment, thumb worrying the edge of the fabric. "A beautiful, bruised, bandaged mess," she muttered, and set about becoming it. She moved carefully, fresh linen across her ribs, clean tunic swapped for the soft top that didn't bite her wraps. The skirt tied at her hip, the tassel swaying. She left the shawl loose over her shoulders, more gesture than cover. In the mirror, her ears were still a little pink from the climb and the stairs and something she refused to name. She huffed a breath at her reflection, half laugh, half dare. Downstairs, Hesta clocked the outfit and said nothing, only lifted a brow and slid a bottle and 2 cups across the counter as if that had been the ask. "For the pain," she said, amused and kind in equal parts. Izzi took the bottle and 1 cup. "I'll return the other when I'm braver." "Leave it on the sand," Hesta called, smile tucked in the words. Outside, night had painted the bay in indigo. Lanterns threw gold coins across the tide. The surf breathed in and out, patient as a sleeping thing. She kicked off her sandals at the stairs and let the cool water kiss her toes, then her ankles. The ache in her ribs flared and settled. She let the bottle dangle from her fingers and followed the curve of shoreline where the beach darkened and the music from the square softened to a hum. He was there. Sirius stood ankle-deep at the tide line, a dark shape against the pearl sheen of waves. A bottle sat in the sand by his heel, unopened. He watched the horizon with the stillness of someone waiting for an answer that might never come. Izzi's steps scuffed lightly. His head turned a fraction, enough to show he'd heard her long before she decided to be heard. His gaze dipped once, taking in the bandages peeking white above her top, the careful way she carried herself. He didn't comment. "You shouldn't be out," he said, voice low enough to be mistaken for the sea. "Everyone keeps saying that," she answered, waiting until the water lapped at her ankles beside him. "I'm tired of being right where I should be." For a few breaths they listened to the water unspool. Far out, a lantern on a fishing skiff bobbed and drifted like a small, stubborn star. "Thank you," she said finally. She didn't dress it up. "For the mountain, for the stitches, for the creek." He didn't look at her. "You're welcome." "You left," she said, without a word. Sirius didn't answer. His gaze stayed fixed on the horizon, the line where sea and sky bled together into gray. Izzi leaned forward a little, trying to catch his eyes. When she did, the weight in them startled her. Not sharp or cold this time, but tired, hollow, almost yearning. For a heartbeat, it seemed like he might step forward into the surf and let the ocean take him. She noticed, felt the prickle of it along her skin, and chose not to press. Instead, she gestured vaguely at the waves, the days that had spilled and blurred together. "I've been thinking about why you would help me just to vanish." "I told you," he said. "I don't know." "Liar." It came out gentler than she meant. He glanced over, her mouth curved. "Maybe you don't want to know." The tide crept up, cooled their ankles. He bent, picked up his bottle, opened it with a flick. "Maybe," he allowed, a ghost of amusement in the word. He took a small swallow and set it down again untouched. She studied his profile, cut clean by lantern light, rimed in salt air, tired to the bone. "Hesta says you stare at the ocean like it owes you an answer." "It does," he said. "And does it pay its debts?" "Not tonight." They stood with that. A gull called once and went quiet. The waves feathered and fell. When she shifted, pain stabbed sharp, and the breath she sucked set her whole side aflame. He noticed the flinch without looking. "You should go in, I know." She rolled her eyes, then offered her hand. "Walk me to the steps, then vanish as you please." He didn't take the hand, exactly. He offered an arm, solid and unshowy. She slid her fingers into the crook of his elbow, let him set an easy pace along the damp sand. At the bottom of the inn's stairs, he stopped, the lantern above humming with moths. "Go rest," he said. "Bossy," she murmured, and released his arm. Izzi lingered, her hand still light on his arm. "How long will you be staying in Cerulea's Rest?" He glanced at her, then back toward the darkened curve of the beach. "A few days," he said, the words quiet but certain, like a promise he wasn't sure why he was making. She nodded, satisfied enough to let go. "Good night, Izzi." Her name in his mouth did something to her ears she pretended the wind had managed. "Good night, Sirius." He turned and started down the beach, shadows stretching thin along the foam. Impulsively she called, "Sirius." He stopped, turned, his face dim in the lantern light. She tossed him a small leather pouch, all her coin from the hunt. He caught it easily, the coins inside clinking against his palm. "Your share," she said, smiling faintly before stepping back into the inn. For a moment he stood there, weighing the pouch in his hand as though it were heavier than gold. Then he slipped it away, turned toward the surf, and disappeared again into the night. Izzi slipped back into the inn, the door shutting soft behind her. The hush of the taproom was broken only by the creak of a stool as Hesta leaned forward on her elbows, grin wide and waiting. "Well?" Hesta sing-songed. "Details, girl?" Izzi froze mid-step, heat climbing her ears again. "There aren't any," she said quickly, clutching the bottle tighter at her side. Hesta's eyes flicked to the silk wrap of her skirt, the bare midriff above the clean bandages, the loose shawl slipping down one shoulder. Why else get all dressed up like that if you weren't meeting someone?" She tapped her chin theatrically. "Half-elf with the stormy eyes, maybe?" Izzi's flush deepened to crimson. "I'm going to bed," she muttered, trying to step around the counter before the woman's grin swallowed her whole. "Of course you are," Hesta teased, trailing her voice after Izzi like a cat pawing a mouse. "But sooner or later you'll tell me everything." Izzi fled up the stairs, shawl slipping further, her heart thumping louder than her ribs allowed. Behind the counter, Hesta leaned back, still smiling, and shook her head. "Sooner or later," she repeated to the empty room before returning to her ledger. Chapter 9. Salt in the morning. Izzi woke tangled in silk and shawl, last night's garb still clinging to her. The skirt's knot had loosened in the night, and the wrap top felt stiff where sea air had soaked into it. She stretched, ribs aching but less than before. For the first time in weeks, she felt, not whole, but on the way to it. She slipped from the bed, combed fingers through her copper-streaked hair, and pushed into the hall without thinking to change. Her feet carried her past a pair of merchants who glanced once, then twice, at her bare midriff and bruised collarbone before whispering into their cups. Izzi ignored them, cheeks warming only a little as she descended the stairs. The smell of fried bread and sea salt pulled her straight to the taproom. Horian's booming laugh rolled through the rafters, a sound impossible to mistake. Sure enough, he and Kaelin sat at a corner table, Horian gesturing wildly with a fork, Kaelin hunched over his plate like a man guarding rations on campaign. "Morning, darling," Hesta called from behind the counter, catching her halfway across the room. The innkeeper's grin was knowing, sharp as ever. "Your tall, mysterious friend is probably back at the beach if you're looking." Izzi's ears burned hot. "I wasn't," she began, but Hesta only waved her along, eyes twinkling. Izzi hurried to the table and dropped into the empty chair opposite Kaelin, pretending not to feel the stares she imagined trailing her. Kaelin paused mid-bite, fork still hovering, his brows furrowing. "That's what you slept in?" he asked, tone puzzled, as if trying to piece together why she'd wear silk and shawl for bed. Izzi glanced down, belatedly aware of the wrap top clinging at her ribs and the skirt still tied at her hip. She covered her side with a hand, then lifted her chin. "Comfortable, that's all." Horian leaned back in his chair, grin spreading wide. "Comfortable? Looks more like you're planning on a swim," he boomed. He lifted his mug in mock toast. "Best warn the gulls or they'll drown trying to keep up." Izzi smirked, playing it off with a shake of her head. "Maybe I am." Kaelin only grunted, still looking at her with that quiet, knowing edge that made her fidget more than Horian's laughter. The table was crowded with plates and mugs, Hesta's generosity clear even at this early hour. A skillet of fried potatoes glistened with rosemary and salt, a plate stacked with flatbread still steaming, bowls of porridge swirled with honey and berries, and a crock of smoked fish that Horian had already claimed as his own. Kaelin worked methodically through his plate, bread torn into neat halves, dipped into the yolk of an egg fried to perfection, while Horian seemed to be in competition with himself, telling a story as loud as thunder while chewing between words. Izzi reached for a slice of flatbread, careful of the ache in her ribs, and dragged it through the honey pooled at the edge of her porridge. The sweetness hit her tongue, almost dizzying after weeks of bland trail food. She leaned back with a soft sigh, closing her eyes for a moment. "Now this," Horian declared, slapping the table with a fist, "is why I'll never leave Cerulea's Rest for too long. Stew at night, breakfasts like this in the morning, and a beach to sleep off both if you overdo it." He pointed at Izzi with his fork, a chunk of smoked fish speared on the end. "You see? You put on silk and smile once, and suddenly the world feeds you properly." Kaelin shook his head, biting into his bread. "Or maybe it's just Hesta feeling sorry for us after the week we've had." Izzi smirked into her cup of watered wine, letting the warmth of food and banter soften the lingering stiffness in her body. For a moment, it almost felt like the world had set its claws elsewhere. The table was crowded with platters, fried potatoes crisped with rosemary, steaming flatbread stacked high, smoked fish that Horian guarded like treasure, and eggs bright with yolk. Kaelin ate methodically, slow and steady, as if every bite were a ration to be measured. Horian, by contrast, was already on his second helping and halfway through a story about how he once outswam a shark twice the size of this inn. Izzi chewed her bread in silence for a while, her gaze flicking between them. Finally, she set it down, brushing crumbs from her fingers. "When I'm healed enough," she said, "I want to go to Rivenholt. I need a new rapier." Both men looked at her. She held their attention, steady. "The old one's Renlin's now. I left it with him. I'll need something of my own before we face what's coming." Kaelin nodded once, practical as ever. "Rivenholt's as good a place as any. We've coin now from the Griffin bounty, and the city's full of steel and scribes. We can get supplies and information both." Horian leaned back in his chair, smirk tugging at his mouth. "Rivenholt it is then. Loud city, good wine, and blades sharp enough to sing. I'll see you there. But once we hit the mainland, I've my own matters to tend. Can't follow you into every storm." Izzi's eyes softened. "We'd be grateful for your company as far as the docks." Horian clapped the table, making the mugs jump. "Then it's settled." For a moment, it was only the sound of forks scraping, gulls crying beyond the window, and the sea breathing against the shore. And in that lull, the three of them found a fragile sense of direction. Kaelin mopped the last of his yolk with a crust of bread, chewing slowly. Izzi pushed her plate away, half-finished, her thoughts drifting like the gulls outside. "I won't keep us here long," she said at last. "2 more days, maybe. That's all I'll need. Any longer and I'll feel like a charity case." Kaelin's tusked mouth curved, but his eyes stayed steady. "You're no charity, Iz. You nearly died. 2 days is fair." Across the table, Horian scoffed, waving his fork for emphasis. "Hesta would house you a season and call it nothing. You're her favorite story now. An elf girl survives a griffin hunt, stitches herself together, and strolls back draped in silks." He leaned forward, grin wide. "You've made her ledger worth reading." Izzi flushed but kept her voice firm. "Still, 2 days." "Then 2 days," Horian said, raising his mug in mock toast. "Enjoy them. Eat until you're stuffed, swim until your scars sting. Once we step back onto the mainland, it's all steel, mud, and sleepless nights." Kaelin clinked his mug against Horian's without a smile. "You don't make it sound inviting." "Because it isn't," Horian said, winking. Izzi let herself laugh softly, a sound that carried more relief than joy. For a moment, the three of them sat in easy company, the clatter of dishes around them, the hum of morning filling the gaps. Beyond the inn's open window, the sea shimmered. Izzi's eyes lingered there a moment before she turned back to her companions. 2 days. Then Izzi traced the rim of her cup with one finger, the thought forming before she could stop it. "I think I'll take a swim, or at least sit in the water a while, feel weightless for a moment." Kaelin's brow lifted. "With your ribs?" She shrugged, forcing a smile. "I'll be careful. Besides, I've missed the sea." Kaelin leaned back in his chair, stretching his shoulders until the joints cracked. "Then I'll come too. Sun on my back, salt in my hair, better than brooding in a corner." Horian snorted into his mug. "You two go play in the waves. Hesta's already claimed me for odd jobs. Apparently the mighty Horian Hale is fit for hauling barrels and patching shutters. Who knew?" He grinned, teeth flashing. "Try not to drown while I earn my supper." Izzi rose, smoothing the wrap at her waist. "We'll manage." Kaelin followed, scooping up his greatsword to sling across his back. The pair stepped out into the salt-bright morning, gulls circling overhead. The beach stretched wide and white below the inn steps, and down the shore, just at the edge of sight, a lone figure stood with his boots in the tide, green eyes fixed on the horizon. Serious. Izzi's heart beat a little quicker. She told herself it was the sun, the ache in her ribs, the thought of cool water easing her body. But really, it was the questions she still carried. Questions only one man could answer. Kaelin shielded his eyes against the glare and huffed. "Good day for it," he said. "Let's see if the sea can't wash some of this weight off." Izzi nodded, already moving down the steps toward the sand, her gaze drifting, unbidden, toward the man at the shoreline. The road again. Izzi stepped off the last stair and onto the sand, her shawl slipping from her shoulders. The tide rolled in cool around her ankles, then her calves. She didn't look toward Sirius, though she knew exactly where he stood, motionless as a statue against the horizon. Something in her chest nodded, stealing away the easy confidence she usually wielded. Charisma fled her like tidewater draining from a pool, leaving her uncharacteristically timid. So she did the only thing that felt safe. She walked straight into the sea. The water climbed past her hips, her ribs, until it pressed against her bandages with a shock of salt. She eased herself back, arms outstretched, floating weightless, letting the sun warm her face and the tide carry her. For the first time in weeks, the pain dulled beneath the surface, replaced with the quiet thrum of her heartbeat in her ears. Kaelin, meanwhile, had paused higher on the sand. His sharp eyes had caught Sirius at once. He stood for a long moment, weighing silence against duty, then trudged over through the surf until he was near enough that the hiss of the waves drowned out most of the world. Sirius didn't turn at his approach, but the faint lift of his chin showed he knew. Kaelin stopped beside him, folding his arms across his chest. For a moment, he only watched Izzi float, the light glancing off her hair like copper fire. Then he said, voice low but steady, "I should thank you." Sirius's green eyes flicked to him, then back to the horizon. What for? For saving her. For patching her up. For carrying her back when the rest of us couldn't. You didn't have to, but you did. The half-elf was quiet long enough that the sea filled the space between them. Finally, he said, "It's no worry." Kaelin grunted, but some of the tension bled out of his shoulders. "You're rough around the edges, but..." His gaze followed Izzi as she let the tide rock her, eyes shut against the sun. "You've got a good heart. Better than I gave you credit for. I'm sorry for that." For a second, Sirius almost smiled, though it never reached his eyes. "Don't mistake what you want to see for what's there." A pause. "Tell me, can a single good deed ever wash away a lifetime of wrongs?" Kaelin was silent a long moment, watching the tide roll in and out. "Maybe not," he said at last. "But it's a start." Sirius could continue to look into the horizon. A faint half-smile marked his face. Kaelin considered what Sirius said, his jaw set. But even with the warning, he found himself less guarded than he'd been since they met. Maybe the half-elf wasn't so bad. Maybe. Kaelin let the silence linger, the tide lapping around their ankles. Then he exhaled, shifting his great shoulders. "I'll leave you be," he said, stepping further into the surf. "Got a date with the sea." He waded out until the waves broke at his waist, then struck out into the deeper water with the deliberate strokes of a man who found comfort in rhythm. Sirius remained on the shore, Kaelin's words echoing in his head. Maybe not. But it's a start. He stared at the horizon as if weighing it against his own past. After a long pause, he huffed through his nose, half a laugh, half dismissal, and reached for the clasp at his collar. The shirt came off, scarred skin catching the morning light. He set it neatly in the sand, his bottle of rum placed atop it like an anchor, and stepped into the water. The sea climbed slowly, knees, hips, ribs, chest. Cold bit into him, sharp enough to make his lungs burn, but he didn't stop. He tilted his head back, staring at the line where sky and water met, and for a heartbeat he thought of swimming toward it, out and out, until the weight of the world finally sank. "Sirius?" Her voice snapped him back. He turned, water lapping at his chest, to see Izzi half floating in the shallows nearby, her hair fanned across the surface like copper fire. Her violet-gray eyes were on him now, her tone caught somewhere between question and relief. The horizon slipped from his thoughts, and he let the sea hold him where he was. Izzi floated a little closer, arms stretched wide against the gentle push of the waves. Her mouth curved, playful despite the bandages at her ribs. "Never thought I'd see you in the water," she said, teasing. "Doesn't suit you. You look more like the brood on the shore with a bottle type." One corner of Sirius's mouth tugged, though his eyes stayed steady. "And should you be swimming with half your body stitched together?" Izzi let her head tip back, the sun glancing off her damp hair. "I'm fine," she murmured, then flicked her gaze to him again. "What's this? Are you worried about me?" He waded a step closer, the water at his chest rippling with the motion. "Only that my work might go to waste if you tear the stitches." She laughed softly, the sound carried on the salt air. "Practical as ever." "Practical keeps people alive," he said. "And here I thought you didn't care," she shot back, eyes glinting. For a breath he said nothing, then finally, He paused, not knowing if he should continue his sentence. The surf rolled between them, cool and bright, as if holding the weight of what neither was ready to admit. Izzi drifted closer, letting the water cradle her body as her eyes lingered on the silver cuff at Sirius's ear. "The same as hers. The same as Valoran. I still have questions for you," she said softly. "About Valoran. About a lot." Her voice trailed, then steadied. "But not today. Today, I just want to live in this moment." Sirius didn't answer, but his gaze held hers, green fire muted by the waves between them. She tilted her head, hair slipping wet across her cheek. "So tell me, do you plan on staring at the sea forever, or are you headed somewhere?" His eyes flicked back to the horizon. "Rivenholt. I've business there. Someone to meet." Before Izzi could press, Kaelin's strokes cut through the water as he swam back, droplets sparking off his shoulders. "Then it seems the tide favors us," he said, breath even. "That's where Izzi and I are bound." Sirius's jaw tightened. "I'll pass." Izzi's smirk was faint but unyielding. "You patched me up." carried me, saved me. If you wanted to walk away, you would have already." She floated a little closer, voice light but firm. "So why not walk the same road, at least for a while?" For a long moment, the waves filled the silence. Finally, Sirius exhaled, a quiet surrender. "Fine. For now." Kalen dipped his chin in approval. "We leave in 2 days. That enough time for you?" "No issue," Sirius said simply. The three of them let the water roll over their shoulders, the sea holding them in a fragile stillness. For the first time, they were not enemies, nor strangers, but something like companions, however temporary. Izzi couldn't hide the small spark of warmth that flickered across her face. The corners of her mouth tilted into something close to a smile, her violet gray eyes softer than they'd been in days. Even her body seemed lighter in the water, shoulders no longer rigid with pain. For the first time since her fall, she looked like herself, mischief and relief tangled together. Kalen swam ahead and hauled himself halfway onto the sand, water pouring in rivulets down his scarred arms. He cupped his hands to his mouth and called back, "I'm heading in. Horian wants me to help him with something or other at midday." "Don't drown each other?" Izzi laughed, shaking her head as Kalen strode up the beach, already wringing water from his hair. She floated for a moment longer, watching the sunlight scatter across the tide, then turned toward Sirius. He was still waist-deep, gaze fixed on the horizon, unreadable as always. But Izzi felt something shift in herself, something reckless maybe, or simply honest. She swam over, the water rippling around them, and rose just high enough to brush her lips lightly against his cheek. "Thank you," she murmured, her voice low but clear. Then she turned, swimming back toward shore with an easy grace, her braid trailing like a copper ribbon in the water. Sirius stood very still, his eyes wide in rare surprise. For a long moment he simply stared at her retreating form, the sea lapping at his chest. His hand twitched at his side, as if caught between reaching for the coin pouch at his belt and the place where her lips had touched. "What am I doing?" he thought. "These are people. People's lives I swore I wouldn't get tangled in again." But the salt air carried her laughter faintly back to him as she stepped onto the sand, and his answer drowned itself in silence. Izzi padded barefoot up the beach, her skirt clinging damply to her legs, and for once the ache in her ribs didn't feel like a burden. The sun warmed her shoulders, and she let herself smile, an easy, unguarded curve of her lips. A new blade, a new road, a new company. The thought of where they might go next filled her with a reckless kind of anticipation. Cutting through the market street, she slowed at the sound of Horian's booming voice echoing from a nearby alley. She glanced over, already half expecting mischief, and wasn't disappointed. There he was, ostensibly helping Hesta haul a cask, but his help was 2 young women, both blonde, laughing at whatever ridiculous tale he spun. Kalen stood nearby, looking both unimpressed and a little too attentive to one of the girls. Izzi arched a brow, biting back a laugh. Help Hesta or pick up women? Figures. And Kalen, blonde of course. His one weakness. Shaking her head, she turned back to the street, laughter bubbling up from her chest. Her wit, dulled by days of pain and bandages, came back sharp as ever. She called out a playful greeting to a merchant sweeping his stoop, winked at a child staring wide-eyed at her silks, and traded a few light-hearted words with a sailor carrying nets across his shoulders. By the time the inn came into view, she was grinning to herself, her charm back in full force, her stride as light as the sea breeze that chased her inside. For the first time since Renlin's blood stained the dock, Izzi felt like herself again, ready for whatever came next. The inn's door creaked open, spilling warm light and the scent of stew over Izzi as she stepped inside. She wrung a last bit of seawater from her braid and found Hesta waiting at the counter, arms folded, grin already sharpening. "Well now?" Hesta said, eyes flicking to the damp silk clinging at Izzi's waist. "Out for a swim or out with your tall, mysterious friend again?" Izzi leaned an elbow on the counter, flashing her best sly smile. "Jealous, Hesta? I'd invite you along, but I think he broods better one-on-one." The innkeeper laughed, shaking her head. "You've got an answer for everything. But don't think I won't get the truth out of you sooner or later." Izzi plucked a grape from a bowl on the counter and popped it into her mouth. "Keep trying. You'll get about as far as Kalen did resisting those blondes Horian found him." Hesta barked a laugh, the sound filling the room. "Our Kalen? Saints preserve us. That orc's never looked twice at anyone since he set foot in this inn." "Looked more than twice today," Izzi said with a wicked glint, leaning back on her heels. The 2 women burst into laughter, the kind that carried and rolled, lightening the air around them. Izzi wiped a tear from the corner of her eye, cheeks aching from smiling. For the first time in too long, it felt easy, like the weight of grief and blood had lifted, if only for a breath. "Feeling better, are we?" Hesta said at last, softer now but no less warm. "I can see it in your step." Izzi gave her a half bow, playful and earnest all at once. And with that, she turned toward the stairs, laughter still bright in her chest, already looking forward to the road ahead.
Thank you for listening. Please like, comment, and subscribe. More chapters are on the way.